Coming to you from the last video store in the universe, it's Binge Movies, episode 153. I'm Jason. This is the show that ranks and eliminates movies to determine which ones are most worthy of preservation for all time, even beyond the end times. On this episode, we rank the top 5 highest-grossing movies of 2002. And they say that a hero can save us. I'm not gonna stand here and wait. I'll hold on to the wings of the eagles. Watch as we all fly away. Ladies and gentlemen, VHS summer has officially kicked my ass. This has been the wettest, hottest, wildest VHS summer. All the VHS vixens have been running wild through the shop. And when I say vixens, it's a gender-neutral term where I come from. It doesn't just mean ladies in bikinis. It also means men in banana hammocks. The hogs have been running wild all summer long. And it's left me I'm wore out. I'm so wore out I had to call on 2 legitimate professionals. To my right, which means nothing to you at home, Catherine Gonzales, film critic, podcaster, best boy, gaffer, WGA striker, deep in the heart of Texas. How's VHS summer treating you deep in the heart of Texas, Catherine?
Oh, it's going good. It's pretty hot.
Yeah. And you have a guest with you on your end. I have you as my guest, but you have a guest. Who's there with you?
Rexito, he's here, my dog.
Yeah.
So if you hear him, that he's just giving his hot takes too. For the fellow dogs who listen, they'll understand.
Yeah. Surprisingly, we have more dogs than women who listen to this podcast. So it's actually a ratio of men, dogs, lizards, women.
Yeah. And he's actually sitting down, which I guess he's growing up now. So he's actually I think this is the first one he's going to listen to me do a podcast.
He's a proper gentleman now. Yeah. He's in his posh phase. He's in his posh era.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. What are his thoughts on Taylor Swift? Does he like Midnights or?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, good. Okay, just want to know. Robert?
If his dad has anything to say about it.
Okay. Robert, you're in your Midnights era tour. That's just you having 2 kids now.
That's true.
Yeah, and so you have a lot of late nights.
I'm also worn down completely.
Yeah. Robert Yaniz Jr., who is the creator and impresario of Crooked Table Productions, goddamn, and is the host of Franchise Detours, and there's another one.
I was gonna wait and let you sweat it out. And Close Watch.
Close Watch. I knew it started with a C. When I knew him, he was just a lad with a podcast, just a great Floridian among many others with a podcast. It was called Crooked Table. It was so simple. And then he decided to build an empire. Decided to go Kevin Feige on all of us.
Thank you for having me back on. The last time I was here, I met the Balrog that was Last Movie Standing.
Yes.
And I'm coming back to you now at the turn of the tide here.
That's right.
I'm in my white era, I guess.
Yes. You're Robert the White.
Yeah.
The robe, the staff, it's a little off-putting, but you carry it off well. Yeah.
I make it work. Yeah.
Yeah. I've never seen somebody with the fedora and the white cloak and the white staff and the beard.
Well, I'm a trendsetter.
You are a trendsetter. That's you're a handsome devil and a trendsetter. Let's get into it. We are talking about the top 5 highest grossing films of 2002, which means we're going to be talking about Men in Black 2, Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, Spider-Man, that's the Sam Raimi one for all you younglings, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Kat's going to carry our ass through that one, and The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Is this the biggest year with 2s in the title? Because it was 2002, it was Men in Black 2, it was Episode 2, and it was The Two Towers. Was that just corporate synergy or just the fates aligning for this episode?
I want to say it's the fates aligning.
God bless you. Yeah. 20 years ago, God conspired for us to have this episode.
Also, it's a little sad to or I don't know. It's very eye opening to know that was 20 years ago, and
21 years ago.
Yeah, 21 years ago. And I'm like, oh my God, I still feel that. But I have interns who were born in 2002. It's like, oh my God.
Well, I consider myself your intern, Kat, in life, and I was born way before then. So, yeah. We're all, if we hold our breath for 5 more seconds, we're all going to be Crooked Table production interns. We're all going to be working for Robert one day.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to need help, Robert. You're doing so many large franchises at a time. You just wrapped up Planet of the Apes in the spring. Throughout the summer, you've got what going on?
I got 10 X-Men movies. So everything minus the New Mutants and the Deadpool films. And it's funny, too, because in the movies we're going to be talking about here, before Franchise Detours happened, when Close Watch was the Crooked Table podcast, I was doing like once a month, just checking in on a franchise and having that like spread across the year. Mm-hmm. And 2019, I did Star Wars. 2020, I did Harry Potter. And then as you know, I had the Lady One, my Balrog, I guess.
Yeah, the Balrog of last movie.
I had her on Franchise Detours to talk about Spider-Man. So yeah, so we're needing Kat and Rexito to carry us through some of these conversations.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. So yeah, this is we're really preparing our audience for a real weak dick episode.
It's a pretty interesting bunch of films, though. I think.
Yeah,
there's a lot of good stuff to get into.
A lot of good stuff to get into, but this is going to be a limp dick episode. Let's get going with VHS Summer 3, the climax, if you will. Right before the hottest, most sizzling party, biggest party of the summer. Robert is familiar with this in the past. It is, of course, Beach Brawl, which is coming up. This is going to be the final episode to decide what goes on the guest list and the short list. Since there's 3 of us, triple threat rules do apply. I'm going to compare notes with my scores, my rankings with Robert and Kat. I will not reveal mine until the end. And then I'm going to have to align myself with either my good friend Robert Yaniz Jr. or my good friend Catherine Gonzales. And last time I sided with you, Kat.
Yep.
Yeah, just because you're just nicer, really.
Thanks, Jason.
Real objective in our rankings.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
Shots fired.
Yeah, shots fired. Yeah. Well, Robert, you're Robert. You're in your Midnights era. You're in a different space right now.
I'm on the way out anyway.
Yeah, there we go.
Jason just slammed in the door in my ass.
This is the last episode that Robert will be.
This is the last episode Robert's ever going to produce. I'm buying the rights to Crooked Table and a hostile takeover.
And then I'll just be Table.
I'm walking.
Yeah. It's just going to be called Table. I'm going to Zaslav his ass. It's just going to be Table, and I'm just going to load it with all of the shittiest episodes I've ever produced. The feed's not going away.
Take off his.
Oh, yeah. Take off his highest rated episodes, the most critically acclaimed. Just get rid of them for tax purposes. All right. Let's go with a probably unnecessary sequel. I've already given away my thoughts. It's 2002's Men in Black 2, which currently has a 38% on Rotten Tomatoes.
May I have your attention, please? This July, they're back in action and back in black. And if you think these guys can cook,
let's make it hot.
Check out the newest BK Back Porch Griller at Burger King. The Black Stack Barbecue Griller. 2 flame-broiled seasoned patties, tangy sauce, melted cheese, and bacon on a bakery bun. So grab your first bite of the Black Stack Barbecue Griller.
Oh, now y'all running.
Men in Black 2 and the Black Stack Barbecue Griller at BK. You got it.
Men in Black 2 was directed by Barry Sonnenfeld, written by Robert Gordon and Barry Fonarow. It's a triumphant return of Tommy Lee Jones, last seen in Men in Black, which is in the vault. Triumphant return of Will Smith, which is from Men in Black, which is in the vault. It's a triumphant return of Rip Torn, last seen in Men in Black, which is in the vault. It was released July 3rd, 2002, back when the summer season sort of meant something. On a budget of $140 million, it made $441.8 million worldwide. Agent J struggles to move on from his partner as a case from MIB's past comes back with a vengeance. Robert, your one-sentence plot synopsis.
Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones shrug their way through a tired mess that does dirty to its vault-worthy predecessor.
Robert coming in hot. Catherine, what do you got?
The one with Laura Flynn Boyle.
Well, we're all seem to be of agreement. let's start with some positives here. I think there are details that we just don't get anymore, even in top class movies. And this is going to sound so stupid. It's so simple. And you probably didn't even notice it. I'm talking about when Sorlena's worm pod lands and it's in perspective and it turns out it's not huge. It turns out it's a miniature. But it's when the worm pod plant thingy that she is starts moving towards the camera. The entire shot is digital, if I'm not mistaken. At least the background, it might be real grass, but the background definitely is. The creature definitely is. And when it's moving towards the camera, quote unquote, what's in the foreground is blurry. And what's in the background is in focus because the camera lens is in focus on the ship and the pod thing. You don't see that with CGI anymore. They don't actually try to create CGI that looks like it's having a different effect on, but the lens is reacting to it differently. Does it make sense? Mm-hmm. So if you're shooting something for real and the lens and the camera is focused on the background, the what's in the foreground is going to be blurred. Everybody knows it has tilt shift on their freaking Instagram. And it's like a similar thing. And it was just a little thing that I noticed. I was like, I don't know the last time I saw a movie, even though now all of our movies are completely inundated with CGI. I don't know the last time I've seen a movie where it tried to convince me the object was actually in the frame, like lens-wise. It was a nice touch. I know from the looks of both of your faces, you do not give a shit. So we'll move on. Laura Flynn Boyle shows up as a Victoria's Secret monster with a binge and purge joke. Was that funny when she gorged herself and then puked because Laura Flynn Boyle had an eating disorder? Was that funny?
No, it was actually I don't remember when I learned of her eating disorder, probably way later. So watching it and knowing that history, it was kind of very like the whole thing, like when she's eating even during the movie, she's eating like a Big Mac and there's like all these like jokes to it. And I was like, I would hope she was in on it, but also even if she was, like, it's just bad to like put that in there. I don't know. It just felt really, I didn't like it at all. It was just kind of, it was very, what's the word? Not cool and,
in poor taste.
Yeah, in poor taste. Even it like like even if she was like okay, we can make fun of it. Like clearly, like she was probably still in it. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah.
So
seems to be.
Yeah, and it felt like what like imagine going on. I can just imagine what was going on behind the scenes with her, and probably like so that actually irked me more than a lot more than I thought. Like ever watching this, because I think knowing that now, I'm like, this is really bad that they were doing that.
Yeah.
And especially having her in the lingerie, and like there's another movie on our list too, like just very the 2002 isms of what we were accepting back then. I was like, whoa,
midriffs.
Okay. Yeah.
We loved midriffs. Yeah. We love women in midriff bearing shirts. In fact, marketing, I don't know if you guys know this, but marketing at the time, in the late 90s and early 2000s, they had two terms for teenagers. They had a term for teenage girls and a term for teenage boys. The term for teenage girls was midriffs. And the term for teenage boys, I think, was mooks. Midriffs and mooks. Because they basically said teenage boys are nothing but cavemen. So if you just appeal to them through violence and sex, that's how you get their money. And teenage girls just all want to be Britney Spears. So if you just appeal to them through like makeup and sex appeal and convince them that they need to be sexy, that's how you get them. And I think MTV created those two terms, and then it spread throughout the marketing world. And so if you go back to early 2000s marketing, every girl is in a midriff bearing shirt, and every boy is like a violent, weird creepo. And it just reinforced the society we live in today. So sorry, Gen Z, we're fucked as millennials. The world you're going to inherit from us will be better than the world we inherited from the boomers, but not by much. Do parts of this movie look like Space Jam to anybody else? When Agent J is writing Jeff, I was like, am I watching Space Jam? Even though Space Jam is what, 95?
Yeah.
96?
96, I think.
96? This is 6 years later, and this movie looks like dog shit.
Yeah, the CG. Like, it was that whole opening scene. Like, I really love those videos that they created, with the thing. Those were cool.
Mysteries in History with your host, Peter Graves.
Although no one has ever been able to prove their existence, a quasi-government agency known as the Men in Black supposedly carries out secret operations here on Earth in order to keep us safe from aliens throughout the galaxies. Here is one of their stories that never happened from one of their files that doesn't exist.
Like it's one at the very beginning and then one in the middle, I think, when Kay is explaining what happened. And so it felt like I want more of that movie, but then the rest of it was just horrible. Because then I watched that movie, and then my husband came in for like the last bit of it, and we were just like, this is all just bad. Like, like it just felt really bad. And we're like, he didn't even know there was a third and the fourth one. He's like, do you think they should do a remake? And I was like, they did it. It was bad.
Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah. And then, but we started watching the third one. It was way better. Like the jokes were landing, and I was like that.
Oh, yes.
Like we didn't finish it, but I was like, wow, this is like infinitely better, which is weird. Yes. I don't remember the third one being worse than the second one, but then like seeing it right, like that was a drastic. Like I guess there was 10 years in between. You would think it would be really worse, but it was just funny from the beginning. Like the first one was.
Yes.
And so the second one must have just been that, like, let's just make another one because, we need to make money and summer blockbuster.
It still took 5 years. Yeah. Like if this came out the year after, then I'd be like, all right, they just rushed it.
It was just like lackluster.
But they seemingly took their time developing the second one.
Which is worse.
And then this is what they came up, way worse. I mean, I loved the first one still, and I saw it in theaters, and I saw this in theaters, and it was immediate, like, oh no. Like pretty early on, you're like, very little of this work. This is, I think, the third time I've seen this movie. I saw it in theaters, and I think at some point over the years, I watched it a second time. I was like, maybe I was too hard on it. I was like, oh no, I hate this even more now.
Yeah.
And so I'm a little resentful of Jason for making me have to watch this a third time, because I really, very little of this movie works for me. Even the Lara Flynn Boyle thing, like, it's a one-note joke. It's like, she's a monster, but she looks hot. Yeah. And that's pretty much all that's it. That's all she's got going on. They give us more of things. They give us more of the worms. They give us more of Frank the Pug.
He was the best part, though. He was the best part, in a way.
Until they give him easy jokes like jamming out to Who Let the Dogs Out.
Yeah, although I like that, though.
You're like, okay. Well,
but now I'm seeing it through a dog, like, just so I can go.
You're seeing it through a dog's eyes.
Yeah, you're reading Rexito's notes. Exactly.
Yeah, Rex whispered in your ear and was like, that was my favorite part.
Yeah, exactly.
I felt represented. It's the only representation he has in the entire thing here. Everything here is worse. What's amazing is I talked about Men in Black 3 for the Stu World Order podcast. Robert, I know you're familiar with the Stu World Order. And that'll be coming out in the fall of 2023. And I unabashedly defend that movie because I think it actually gets better with time, too. The further removed you are, now after they got Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson, who stunk up the screen, the likes of which I have not seen between two star actors who have previously had comedic and romantic sexual chemistry and had zero fucking chemistry. They might as well have been aliens to each other. I've never seen something so abysmal. That's not true. But as far as like a legacy sequel, soft reboot, remake, whatever, trying to cash in the franchise, that's one of the all-time worst. We've collectively forgot as a society. Men in Black 3 is actually the closest to, I think, the humor and sensibilities. It feels like the first movie in a weird way. Even though Josh Brolin is K most of the time, and he does an excellent job.
Yeah.
Because that could be hokey, but it isn't. This is hokey horseshit all the way through. Will Smith still has the Ali cadence. There are scenes when he's talking where he's still in the Muhammad Ali pattern and way of speaking. I'm like, you're fucking Ali. You're not Agent J. The first movie, the first movie is really simple. It's a complete and total story that ends on a heart-breaking note when Kay, after all they've been through, goes, you ever just stop looking at the stars? It's perfectly bookended with what happened at the beginning of the film with H. Is it H? Maybe? Something. The old man, his mentor in Men in Black. And you're like, oh, shit. Oh, no, because by that point, the movie has earned, this is a dynamic, iconic duo by the end of that first film. And the throwback suits and the piece of shit throwback car, the Cutlass Supreme or whatever they're driving, all of it feels so iconic instantly. The only wrong note in that entire movie is the very, very end where Linda Fiorentino becomes a Men in Black agent, and they're in Armani suits that are horribly dated, and they change the glasses and all that sort of shit. And this movie doubles down on that. It's like, well, why have all the iconic stuff that you remember from the first film when it could all just be product placement? So the suits are different. The car is a fucking Mercedes Benz. Like, oh, this is the new hotness. They try to make it a joke. It fucking sucks. The new song sucks. It's Nod Your Head stinks. It does not top the original Here Come the Men in Black. This is garbage, and you're wrong. Robert, you're wrong. We don't get more of everything because guess who's not in this movie? The fucking twins. They're not even on the set. Bob and are gone. They're gone. Oh, yeah. They're gone. Where are the fucking twins, Robert? Where are the fucking twins? Answer me.
The contract negotiations just didn't work out.
They haven't had work since. They haven't had steady work since.
Poor guys.
Poor guys. Is it because they're conjoined? I don't know. Where's the representation for conjoined? Not only that, but they're like flower pod creatures. She's a flower pod creature.
Well, maybe they had Johnny Knoxville with the two heads, and they were like, "We can't have. We already got that representation."
Oh, all of that is horrible. All of that is horrible.
That is horrible.
It looks horrible. His character is pointless. Like it's not even. It's not funny. He doesn't do anything, and he disappears in the third act. It was just so fucking bizarre. This movie stinks. Final thoughts, either one of you. Let's pass this.
No, I really hate this movie. I always have. It negates the original's ending, like you were saying, Jason. I always felt like if they were going to make a sequel, just commit to no Tommy Lee Jones and just have it be Will and Linda Fiorentino or something. This movie can't decide whether Will is, the new hotness or old and busted, because half the movie he's just like, oh, I've been so tired of being a man. But dude, you've only been doing this for a few years. It took Kay like 30, 40 years to get to that point. Yeah. Here he's already like, I'm a veteran at this. I'm tired of being a part of the Men in Black. I kind of want out. There could have been something there as far as the subplot of him missing personal connection and him sort of not neuralizing Rosario Dawson's character, who, by the way, is one of the only good things about this movie. This is the first time I saw
I don't think so.
Rosario Dawson in anything. And she's not great in it,
they don't give
but
her anything
I
to
like
do.
Rosario Dawson. Exactly. Yeah. No, they give her...
Just smile with wide-eyed. Yeah. She's so beautiful, but she was just like wide-eyed.
It's our introduction to Rosario Dawson. Maybe that's why I'm like, oh, there she is. Good. Something.
Our introduction to Rosario Dawson is the very problematic movie Kids, where they had real underage kids doing real crazy shit. So that's our introduction.
And here we have Rosario Dawson hanging out with the worm guys with like "Don't fall asleep" jokes.
Yeah, that was bad.
I was just like, oh God.
Well, now hang on a second. That's bad.
Yeah.
In the logic of the movie, if anybody in Men in Black is going to get handsy, it's going to be the worms.
True.
That's literally their character. They're thieves, they're liars, they're blasphemers, and they're grabby. They're gropey. I think they're gropey across the board.
Yes.
I don't think Jay could fall asleep with them. I think they'd grab at him too, or pickpocket him. They're bad. They're bad little worms.
Yeah. So much of this is just reheated. Like you have Kay coming in and getting the last suit he'll ever wear. Pause again, and we're just like, oh Jesus. The locker thing, the society in the locker,
all hail
and the
Kay.
very twist
All hail
at the
Kay.
end. The twist at the very end with them being in a locker, and it's just this warmed over gags from the first movie that are worse this time around. And you have.
Did you laugh at the idea that pornography is a part of their religion?
No, I didn't. The only thing that made me laugh is that I forgot about this gag is when Kay is being is taken into headquarters to try and deneuralize him, and he sticks his hand in that little blue sphere, and it creates a tidal wave, and all these little aliens are like, "All is lost!" running.
Yes.
That was the only time I laughed in this movie. Other than that, it's all rip torn and wire work for some reason. The Balchinians, I don't know, overextended gags like in the pizza place, pointing around. I have nothing but negative things to say.
Can you explain to us what a Balchinian is, Robert?
I don't know why you're delegating me the expert on this, but it is an alien race in which a pair of testicles are dangling from the alien's chin, and that's their sore spot.
Kat, is that funny?
No, actually, I think I like looked away doing something when I was watching it, and then I looked back. I was like, "What is that?" And then I was like, and then he gets kicked in the ball, like in the thing, and I was like, "Oh my god, that's so stupid."
Is the scrotum on the chin smart? Is that smart writing? Either one of you, it's open for discussion. We're all in agreement it stinks. So let's say, how bad does it stink? Kat, we'll start with you. What's your score? What's your rank for Men in Black 2?
Yes, so it's my 5th one, and it's a 5 out of 10.
Okay, all right. So number 5, 5 out of 10. All right. Let's see here. I should have planned accordingly. Oh, okay, all right. And Robert, what about you?
It's also my 5th of the my worst of the week.
You guys are crazy.
I'm much less. I'm much less kind than Kat. I'm going 2.5 out of 10.
You guys are absolutely crazy because there's a movie we're going to talk about right now. It's one of the worst things that's ever been put to film. And by film, I mean digital camera. All right, well, moving on to a movie that should be the worst of everybody's week and worst of everybody's lifetime and worst in everybody's franchise. One of the worst movies ever made by a human being. Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, which has a 65% Rotten Tomatoes. Zoomers, I don't care what you say. You cannot revise history. This is garbage.
Oh, blast! This is why I hate flying. Anakin, do you copy? This is Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Always a pleasure to meet a Jedi.
Rated PG.
It was directed by George Lucas, written by George Lucas and Jonathan Hales, with triumphant return of all these people from Star Wars. It came out May 16th, 2002, and a budget of $115 million. We were all duped yet again. $653.8 million. A creepy, abusive, emo jerk as a lovelorn space Jesus, and for some reason, no one notices.
The Star Wars saga takes a big step towards the dark side thanks to the galaxy's cringiest love story.
And then I always remember it as just the one before the one I actually like from the old movies.
Yeah.
Everything about Star Wars has been wrong since 1997, roughly, since the special editions. Not a single good decision has been made about Star Wars since the 90s. It needs to be done. It needs to be put to bed. They need to stop trying. They need to stop doing anything with it. Maybe a couple of video games have been good. That's about it. Especially within the main continuity and this main quote-unquote saga. It wasn't a saga. The saga was told. It was in 3 movies. The best part of this story and the best part of the Skywalker anything concluded in 1983, and we never, ever need to return to any of these characters. I don't need to know where people get blasters. I don't need to know about bugs in people's blood. I don't need to know, especially when you're going to choose to make Darth Vader, of all people, the savior of the universe and the most pivotal character who's ever existed in the history of everything. And you make him an 8-year-old Muppet who cannot act. And then you cast a completely different person who is immediately, as soon as this movie starts, one of the most unlikable, psychotic, actively evil, unhinged people in history. And this is supposed to be when he's likable. He has got a line very early in the movie where he's like, it's like, why can't we see in the room? Obi-Wan was like, she turned the cameras off. I don't think she likes me looking at her. It's not just that Hayden Christensen is awful in these movies. And I don't give a shit about Obi-Wan Kenobi because that is one of the worst things. That's one of the worst TV shows of all time. Fuck all of that. Hayden Christensen is an awful performance, but the character of Anakin Skywalker, all of their good memories, all of his heroics, all of the things that would ever endear us to this character happen in between the movies of episode 1 and episode 2. Star Wars is addicted to telling their worst fucking stories and then giving Dave Filoni a cottage industry of having to go, well, actually, in between, in these 5 years, all this amazing stuff happened. And we have to introduce 50 more Jedis and 25 more Yodas and 65 more droids and 3.5 more Darth Vader prototypes before we get to it to make sense of any of it. And it's just tired. Star Wars is tired. It's dead. It's in the dirt. How many fucking half-robot Sith Lords do we have now? The Clone Wars and the hunting of Darth Vader hunting the Jedi was supposed to have wiped all but 2 out. All but 2 in the galaxy. How many fucking Jedi are left over now? Every week another Jedi emerges seemingly in some kind of continuity. It's like, oh, I was a hidden Jedi and I have all these incredible powers. It's like, where the fuck were you? Every time they do more, it becomes less. And it ruins this, which is a simple fucking story about a boy who's basically King Arthur killing a monster and then killing a spooky monster wizard. Why is Palpatine a 45-year-old man? Palpatine is a 10,000-year-old spooky fucking wizard. When he gets off of that ship in Return of the Jedi, when you saw that as a kid, did you think to yourself, well, he's probably about 47 years old and has a wife and a child and a granddaughter? No, you were like, that's a spooky wizard like out of fucking Disney. He's a classic spooky evil wizard. He's a million fucking years old. He's not a guy who just couldn't stop blasting himself in the face and turn into the fucking Monster Mash. I hate this shit. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. And I hate the idea that I now live in a world where people are like, no, this is good. No, it isn't good. Everything that's wrong with Star Wars is like the trajectory is just off from frame one. All the story alignments and character alignments are wrong. Why does Palpatine need to be a middle-aged man? Why does Anakin have to be a child? Why do you cast a Obi-Wan? And I think, no offense to Ewan McGregor, because he does a good job. He's the only redeeming thing in any of this. But why do you cast somebody so young when 18 years later, the guy's 80 years old? Get a fucking middle-aged actor, for fuck's sake. What are we doing here? None of this makes any sense. There is nothing about Anakin Skywalker that would make Padme fall in love with him. Why can't she be a queen and a senator? Why'd she have to give up being the queen of her planet to be a senator for the Galactic Republic? It doesn't make any sense. She's representing her goddamn planet. I hate this shit. I hate it. Anakin is unhinged. He's imbalanced. Anakin Skywalker behaves more like an 80s movie bully in this movie than he does a hero at any point in time. He's whiny, cringe-inducing performance is as bad as we said in 2002, and revisionist history will never undo the damage this film has done to the Star Wars saga. Not a single person has learned a single lesson in the history of Star Wars from this movie. They just continue repeating its horrible failure over and over again. Watch the Book of Boba Fett and tell me it isn't fucking Attack of the Clones. Watch parts of goddamn Solo and tell me it isn't fucking Attack of the Clones. I don't give a shit where he got his last name. I don't give a shit where he got his blaster. I never wanted to know that somebody fucked the Millennium Falcon before its computer was plugged in. I don't even know why the Millennium Falcon's so sassy. It's just a funny gag that it cusses C-3PO out. That's the gag. It's funny. It's a foul-mouthed computer. Ha ha ha. I didn't know that it was a robot Lando Calrissian fucked. I didn't need to know that. That's not funny. That's weird. This stuff is junk. Star Wars is junk, and I don't ever want to watch it ever again, except for some of The Mandalorian.
And because The Mandalorian goes down by Disney.
Yeah, because The Mandalorian is not about any of this shit for the most part. When it's just about fucking space adventures between a guy and a Muppet on some weird planet with monsters, that's fine. That's what Star Wars is now. Let it be that. I don't need any more of this shit. I don't want any more Kyber crystals and Sith Lords. I don't want to spend $5,000 in a warehouse in Orlando to pretend like I'm traveling among the stars. And apparently nobody else does either, because a year after they fucking opened it, they closed the goddamn thing. This is stupid. Fuck you, Star Wars. I hate you. Go ahead.
There's Jason with a very measured response to this movie. That's pretty good.
I feel like I can't add to that. I'll get...
Palpatine has a line in this movie where he goes, basically says, Anakin, never listen to anybody and you will be unstoppable. And they're like, we think there's a Sith Lord somewhere around here. You think? And then there's another thing where it's like, oh, well, maybe Count Dooku. Who the fuck is Count Dooku? They present to us, Count Dooku just exists like he was in the first movie. We've never heard of this son of a bitch. And then it's just like, but he's doing clones, but there's another Jedi that ordered clones. Every Jedi becomes a Sith for at least 6 months of their life. This is all stupid. It's so stupid. Count Dooku And then one of them is like, well, maybe Count Dooku's the bad guy, and fucking
Sam Jackson.
Yeah, Sam Jackson's like, well, he's a former Jedi. It's not in his nature. Not in his nature. First of all, every Jedi's evil. They're all either incompetent or evil. And on top of that, he's a former Jedi, which seems to be, it would be in his nature because he decided not to be a peacekeeper in the galaxy. The fucker decided to leave the Jedi Order. Why wouldn't it be in his nature to make evil fucking clones? And Boba Fett, oh, I needed to know who Jango Fett was. It's the same fucking guy. They couldn't even give, like, their whole idea, like, we're going to make Boba Fett, we're going to flesh him out into a real character. No, he's just a guy in a fucking suit. He just has a cool suit. And in the 80s, that's all we fucking needed. We just needed guys in cool suits. We don't need his fucking backstory. And they give it to us. It's not a backstory. He's just a clone of another guy in the same goddamn suit. In the same suit. What the fuck? And when he picks his dad's head up and the dad's head doesn't slide out of the helmet. As soon as that kid picked that helmet up, that head is dropping out of that helmet. This movie
I don't want to be that guy, but I think there's a shadow of the head bouncing out of the helmet off screen. Like,
is there?
When it bounces?
Is it like PG? Is that the PG-13? They have to like adhere.
I think you can like see like it's a small detail. See, I don't know. Kat, do you want to follow this? Because, or do you want me
this movie is actually
jump on the blade?
This movie is actually my favorite film in the Star Wars saga.
It's actually my number one ranked in this. And that's how.
I'm sorry.
And that's how we ended our friendship. No, I remember. Because I do like the third one. I think just because it goes into like the Darth Vader kind of thing, and I think it just kind of leads into those other movies, I guess. But I remember it being, even when I seen it back then, because I didn't have the knowledge I have now of like what was good and bad, I guess. I just was going at it like from like, 12-year-old kind of thing. But I still remember it being like a little bit boring. I never liked watching this one as much, like the first two. So going back, I was like, ugh, I don't know. And I still remember the cringe lines. And then I find it funny because watching it's like so staged. Like it's not even like it's just Padme and Anakin are like, now they're sitting in the couch and let's do this romantic line, like, and then or they're like, or they're playing in a field, it's just like just basic 101. That's not how things happen. And I know movies are a little different. Like obviously there's a lot of things that are not the way it really happens, and I don't need authenticity of like the way it actually happens because that's boring. But that just felt overly. That's why I think it was overly awkward too, because it's okay if they're not like, obviously this was I think Hayden's first movie or something or whatever, and it's a big thing to take on. So yes. I kind of now I give him a little bit more lenience because I remember like having a crush on him after this and blah blah, and followed his career for whatever it was, and so I kind of give him leniency because that was not an easy situation. And if someone said, "Hey, you want to play Anakin Skywalker?" I think would be like, "Yeah, I'll go," and get that that like that's a crazy role of a lifetime.
Sure.
And so I know he was probably, you can see also, I think he was really trying his best. And then Natalie Portman, who's, at that point had done so much, she's, I think, really trying to do what she can. But it just, I don't know, it felt so forced. And I think they didn't give him a fighting chance in those scenes, because there's other movies where you see like they're not as good actor, but like it's just so natural and like it doesn't feel as there's like charm. There's charm, and so you can kind of look past that, but they make it so obvious that like this is his first one. And then I couldn't get over just because like having my hair like the little that I used to put like fake things, and so like seeing his braid just makes me so. Even back then, like that straight thing, it just feels so fucking fake. I was like, could you get a little wave in there? like it was just so bad. And then,
is there anything?
I never liked that.
As a woman, other than his looks, is there anything about not Hayden Christensen, but the character of Anakin Skywalker? Is there anything attractive or likable about him?
Watching it now, because I don't know what I was thinking back then. I was probably like, oh, whatever. It made me so cringe. Like it was like the things he would say, like, especially after he like goes and finds his mom, and he's like, "Oh, I killed all these people, even the women and children." And she's just
they're
like,
animals.
Yeah, I killed them like animals.
MAGA tirade.
Like,
yeah,
it's okay. People get angry.
Yeah,
to be angry is to be human. Like,
and then I was just like, okay, because it really diminishes Padme's character, where she's used to be a queen and she was all about the Republic, and then she tries to fight it in a way, but then like I wish if they had proposed, like if Anakin had been like more of a, like more charismatic, maybe a little bit older, and just and he go, because it's like the villain, like Killmonger, you can kind of understand, like, you know, they're not bad, but they have that sort of like, you know, like there could have been a part where his history, like growing up, he's kind of a messed up child, never had really therapy. Then you go into this Jedi training program. You can't just turn off. You can't just turn off your emotions, even though they're trying to. It's sort of like a little bit cultish, you know, in that way. So I think there could have been a really compelling story where she could have, if he had just been more charming and less cringy and less like stalkery, and like, I loved you since I was 10 and she was, I don't know what, like 20 or something.
Yeah,
which is not that bad, because I mean, there's the it's always the opposite, like the older men with the younger women, and we accept that. So I was like, okay, cool, power to Padme, you know, whatever.
Right.
So, but if I'm going to go younger, then I need it to be some like like really charismatic,
correct, and
person, not a child. Like I would feel like I would be his mom. Like, don't go do anything bad, Anakin. Like,
right. He never. Here's the whole point. He never needed to be 8 years old.
It's not attractive. Yeah,
he could have just been her age.
Yeah, because it really undermines her. Like, kind of being like
her entire character.
Yeah, because she's just choosing this person who obviously she knows is not the best, which is fine. Because like I said, if they had given him more of a compelling thing of like this thing, but he just is very whiny and like has these issues, and then just says the weirdest stuff. Like if he's never like been around. I don't know. Like it just feels weird. Like, why would you go in this way?
He's like, I want democracy. And he's like, well, she's like, well, that's what we're doing. But sometimes there's a debate and you can't reach a compromise. He's like, did I make them compromise? And
yeah, just like, so childish.
And like, it just seems like.
He's like, oh, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Here's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
This character that they end up making, regardless of who plays him, they end up making this entire prequel trilogy, is not the character that Alec Guinness is talking about when he's sitting down, when talking and describing his father to Luke. He's like, well, you knew my father. And he's like, oh, yes. By the time I met your father, he was already the galaxy's greatest star pilot. And he was a cunning warrior and a good friend. Like, that's not this guy. Because when we see him, he's like, no, Master Obi-Wan, I won't do what you tell me.
Yeah, it just feels like it feels real. It feels like teenage girl, like the stereotypical teenage girl. Like, don't tell me what I do.
Yes.
Like, and I was just like,
teenage girl. Like he's a stereotypical teenage girl. It's like, this isn't the galaxy's greatest star pilot. Why? Because he was an 8-year-old Muppet who did the fucking raced on a pod racer. That doesn't make him the galaxy's greatest star. Cunning warrior because he blew up the trade. What the fuck? At some point, they're like, well, it's either the Trade Federation or the something guild, and it's just
Commerce Guild,
Guild, or Trade Federation. Those are synonyms. Those are the same thing. They go to a 1950s diner in Star Wars, for God's sakes, and he's like, oh, Obi-Wan Kenobi, his old friend Dexter Jetster. And here's
everybody's favorite.
Dexter's Jetster, the 1950s. Even the robots on roller skates serving milkshakes. Whoa, it's Star Wars. Get it? American Graffiti. I made that too. Listen, if you're just going to repeat a lot of the shit you've already done, which is what this trilogy does, then why isn't Anakin Skywalker have a little bit of the suave of
like
I
would
Solo?
Prefer the Jango Fett character in this one, you know, like that. Like I would if I was Padme, I would go with him. Like, you know, like,
because if you got a Han Solo sort of character, like what if it's he's so good he's got swagger, and what if swagger's his downfall because it's pride?
Then you have Padme be like, well, maybe I can fix him.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's also that horrible trope of women trying to fix like men.
Right. Well, yes.
But here's the thing.
Which horrible trope do you want?
Yeah.
It's kind of
it's the thing. But here's the thing. If he's a good guy and we see him, he's heroic and he helps people and he helps the innocent and he's idealistic, but he's just a tad arrogant. Because the whole thing is, I thought I could train him like Yoda trained me, and I was wrong. He was too old and all this sort of shit. It's as if George Lucas never went back and watched his original films to decide who the fuck these characters were.
Weird.
And because here's the thing. if you're just going to repeat it, well, then we could see, well, because they're clearly doing a thing where obviously Leia gets her, I'm going to become a general and shoot guns and stuff from Padme, right? Mm-hmm. And they even do the fucking proto bun haircut 10 times on Padme just to reinforce that's Leia. That's Leia. She's in all white. That's Leia. That's Leia's mom. And you just fucking double down on it. I'm not saying it's good because you should just write a new character, but if you're not going to, you just make Anakin Skywalker goddamn Han Solo. And a Jedi Han Solo, and by the way, now that we have a sequel trilogy, that would make fucking sense of why Ben Solo is the way that he is when we finally see him at the end, where he's a little bit of both. He's a little bit of Luke, he's a little bit of Han at the end. Fuck, man. It's just like, these people, how do you make so many bad decisions? I don't understand it.
And also, the thing that always got me about the whole series, like all 9 or whatever, is like we never see any of besides like I think I really like the first one with the double lightsaber thing.
Yeah.
But we never saw any of those cool battles. I kept hearing Jedis are the best, whatever, and never see any of those battles. Like we see a lot of like in this against ships and things and those kind of battles like in the air. But I always wanted that epic fight scene, and I think there's like a few, but like it's like they're so great, but I was like, I need to see it at one point. Like you guys are just whining over here. Like we didn't see any of his training. We just assume like, oh, I'm gonna be the best. I would even like if they had put like a fighting montage between him and sort of like we get in Dune now, like when they're he's training him to do kind of like the be like the warrior. Like I wish we would have got some of that. It just feels like there's too much like we're going on what they're saying, but then what they're saying is shit, so then we can't even go. So it's not even like John Wick when like in the first John Wick movie where they're like, oh, he's like he killed a guy with a pencil, and like we're like, yeah, right, but we're like, cool, that sounds awesome, and then we see it happen.
Yes, correct.
And then they live up to it. Even if he didn't live up to it, at least it was like we saw they tried to live up to it. This one we just hear a bunch of stuff, and I think that's also why
we had a lot of great adventures off screen.
Yeah,
it's like, thanks.
Like, can you show one of those instead of like him just
sitting
whining,
on a couch, whining on a couch for 45 minutes,
like a fireside. Like, how did we even get there? Like, there's no entrance. Like, you guys were just like. I've never sat there like with my head like let's just sit down and like I don't know.
How did that conversation start? Yeah, they just sit down and there's all of a sudden he's like, I'm haunted by the kiss that you should never have given me and all of that.
When I was 8 years old, I've been haunted every day since a innocent kiss you gave me. Yeah.
Did I mention I don't like sand?
Go ahead,
I don't like sand either, but it was just weird. It was just
part of the First of all, if they were going to do a prequel trilogy, they should have started from this point in the story. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Episode 1, and this is why I prefer episode 2 to episode 1, is because this story is at least pertinent, at least going somewhere. It's giving us the beginning of the Clone Wars. It's giving us if we're going to explore the origin of everything, at least giving us the origin of things instead of the story behind the story that happens before things actually start, which is what the previous movie is.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So I appreciate that part of it. We get Anakin and Obi-Wan's dynamic. We get the beginning of the Death Star. We get, if we're going to go back with Boba Fett and give us a backstory that we don't need, at least we're exploring some of these characters in the history in the universe. I have a weird place for this movie because I'm that bizarre strain of Star Wars fan that I was born when Return of the Jedi came out. I was born that year, so I should have grown up with those movies, but I didn't even really get into Star Wars until the special editions. So I've never been bothered by a lot of those changes in the same way that a lot of people are. The Jabba the Hutt scene obviously is terrible, and Greedo shooting first, that kind of thing.
I'm younger than you, Robert. I'm younger than you, Robert. Don't make it seem like I'm an old man. I'm younger than you.
I didn't say that. But you probably saw Star Wars before the special edition.
Yeah, it was on TV constantly.
Reference point. Yeah, see, I didn't really get into that for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So I was fully on board with these movies at the time. And so I'm probably the most positive on this movie, even though I concede that everything Jason says is accurate.
Why isn't this entire trilogy about the Clone Wars?
I mean,
and we never see.
Yeah, we never fucking see.
Yeah, there's an animated series.
Yeah.
That came out 20 years later. Dave Filoni was like, "Let me fix this shit," which he's doing now, by the way.
Yeah, although I do feel the same way as Robert, because I think I may have seen like bits and pieces of the old one on TV, you know, like on cable when it was on, but I never really got into it because I think I was too young still.
Yeah.
So I think these were the ones when I started going to the theater, and so I couldn't. I did start with these, so I think I don't have as much hatred either for these. And then
here's
the second, like in the second.
Robert was born in the 70s, Kat, and you were born.
I was 88.
You were born in
1998.
I'm 58 years old.
Yeah. But like but I can see like all those. I think it's weird because it's like I put this as I don't know when we're ranking these, but
just do it now. Fuck it.
Okay, yeah. So I had to decide between the fifth and fourth one, and then I was like, but it's weird that this one falls as my number 4 because the Men in Black 2 just felt like no soul. And although you can argue based on your rants that this is the worst one, I did feel like I did like some of the aspects of like some of the effects I did like, and like I think the second half of the movie kind of like the music and the momentum, you know, something bad is happening. Where it's okay to keep like I liked it. I liked that part. Like it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be to rewatch it as it was Men in Black 2. And then it made me feel like, oh, I really want to watch the third one, which I really love, Revenge of the Sith. So I guess that's the only reason why I'm putting it 4th and not 5th. It
made me wish that Skywalker Ranch had burned to the ground, and every ounce of celluloid for every single Star Wars ever was burned, and all we had were the non-special edition DVDs, and they just couldn't do anything past that. That's what I wished.
Yeah, I do feel bad though for hating Christian like Anakin, because I don't think I'll watch this for a while again, just because he is very whiny boy, and I was like, oh
yeah.
Here's the other thing: for his downfall to be a tragedy, for us to really truly feel the pathos of the galaxy's greatest potential Jedi, or the hero of the galaxy falls and becomes its worst villain. We have to see him. We have to like him. We have to want to be him, or want to be with him,
or at least understand where he's coming from. Because I don't believe in the likability factor as much anymore. Because I think that's sort of like, I don't need to like my main character, but I need to understand why he's doing what he's doing, and it needs to be.
He was too old for the training. The saga's explanation for that. Yeah.
And so when the fall eventually happens, it's to me it's fait accompli, because I know Anakin Skywalker's Darth Vader. That's the other thing. You can't go back. Like, we have one of the greatest shocking reveals in movie history, and then go back and be like, now we're going to explain how it happened. It's immediately less interesting.
Yeah, that's why I haven't watched a lot of the Star Wars shows or things, because it just feels like, well, I know what it's getting to.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think and most of the time I would like to know more, like in these other movies. I would love to see prequels and stuff, but lately I haven't wanted to see that, because I think it negates all the magic of the original. Like, it's just, I don't know. If you over explain it too much of why,
like the Force is just bacteria in your bloodstream.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's midichlorians. And midichlorians are made up of wills. And wills are these little organisms that have entire universes and galaxies inside themselves. And they live inside your bloodstream. And some people have more of that inside their blood. And that makes them more in touch with the Force. And Anakin was completely conceived by the Force, which means the Force came upon Shmi. And Shmi was then impregnated by a bunch of bacteria, and that grew a baby inside of her, and that baby is Jesus, and that space Jesus was a real son of a bitch.
And that makes Palpatine God,
because
that makes influenced the midichlorians.
But at the same time, Palpatine was fucking some lady off screen and gave birth to either a son or a daughter. We're not clear. It could be either one. And then they had a son or a daughter, and they were like, we're going to dump you on this planet. And then here we are. And then she's a Skywalker. What the fuck? Get the fuck out of here. All right. What's your score, Kat?
5.2.
Okay, so not much difference. Rob,
yes.
Hit me.
So again, everything you said accurate. It looks very video gamey. The whole romance, air quotes romance, is pretty much indefensible.
Yeah.
What I do like about this movie, and when I covered the Skywalker saga on my podcast, I said on there that I kind of view this prequel trilogy as like a different protagonist every movie. The first one is Amidala's movie. The last one is Anakin's. And this is I view this as more Obi-Wan's movie. So this is basically an Obi-Wan detective story. That's the stuff I find more interesting, is Obi-Wan running around the galaxy trying to solve a mystery. In the arena, the arena battle at the end, the execution style with the creatures, the Jedi all coming. Like, I find that stuff entertaining. There's actually because at the time when this came out, this was released in IMAX. They could only handle up to 2 hours of runtime. So they edited this thing down by like 20 minutes. And what did they cut was all of the Anakin and Padme and, my first kiss, his name was Paolo, and he was in the whatever. He was older than I, very cute. He became an artist, like all that crap. The rolling around in the fields, all the Anakin Padme stuff. They cut 20 minutes of that. And I think it's a much better movie. And I wish that they had that cut available somewhere. There's some parts of this movie that do feel reactive. The greatly reduced role of Jar Jar, I think is I think a wise decision. I think it avoids some of the things that people were criticizing it for with the previous film.
But the fact that he's a step and fetch it character.
I think they even lean into the fact that people hate Jar Jar by having him be the kind of the sap that's like, we need a
Dello
army. That's what we need.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think about what do you think about the racist fish trade federation guys? Real racist.
I don't care for them.
Long duck dong.
We get much less of them here too, which I think is we get Christopher Lee, and who the hell is Dooku? But also Christopher Lee. I'm never gonna say no to some.
I got a better option for Christopher Lee, where he's the exact same fucking character, and yet his scheme makes some kind of goddamn sense. What is Count Dooku's role?
He is he's Palpatine's apprentice. He's the one that's the public face of starting the war.
Who are the separatists?
The Separatists are all the planets that are trying to break away from the Republic.
Why are they trying to break?
Again, you're focusing on all the minutia.
It's not the minutia. It's the plot of the movie.
But it's the backdrop. We don't care about.
They decided not to make a trilogy of films about the Clone Wars, where all these people became heroes. Right. The Jedi fell and were destroyed, and all this sort of shit, and the birth of Darth Vader, and the rise of Anakin Skywalker, and the rise of the Emperor, and the end of the Republic. They chose not to focus on any of that. Instead, they chose to focus on the goddamn Trade Federation and the supply annex, what it was,
the
Commerce Guild and Trade Federation,
all the Geonosian locust people that they have on this planet.
Count Dooku and his mentor, who's another Jedi who maybe became a Sith, who ordered a bunch of clones on Geonosis, and the Jedi didn't know it, or Camino, and they cloned a bunch of Jango Fett. It's just all wrong. Everything about it's wrong. What's your score? What's your rank?
I have it fourth as well.
God.
Okay. And even with all the things I said, I'm still giving it a 6 out of 10. Like, is it great? Of course not. Jason again is right about everything he's saying. I'm not saying this would be my choice for this movie, but this being the movie that it is, I still think there are some things that are entertaining enough.
What you're saying is, when you were 30 years old, you saw it for the first time on an IMAX screen, they cut 20 minutes out of a 2 hour and 20-minute movie.
It was a better version.
It was a better version. That's what's in your head, so that's why you like it.
No, I rewatched it. I've seen this a bunch. I saw this a lot at the time. So I have like a little bit of nostalgia for it in that way. But it's also, I read something at one point that Lucas had an outline for what had happened prior to the original film, like the backstory of those characters and all of that. And that like 60% of that was in Revenge of the Sith. And the rest of it was kind of split between these other two movies, and you can feel it.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is, like, there's 20% of good stuff in this movie that's lost amidst a sea of misguided decisions. Some of which I think this series has reckoned with better than others, calling out the fact that the Jedi were arrogant assholes, and
which is awful.
Like the Last Jedi, which is awful. But I'm not defending it. It's still fourth on my list, Jason. I'm not saying it's the best. It's still bottom 3.
When you're a child, and you are watching a film, and the entire film is a simplified idea that there is literal black and white, good and evil. And it's about fun, space, swashbuckling adventures where you're speeding through the stars and landing on crazy planets and fighting big old monsters and swashbuckling through adventures and saving a princess, but the princess turns out to be a badass and she ends up saving you, and it's so fun, and it's all this like My Girl Friday pithy banter back and forth between all these characters. Everybody's all the dialogues, bing, 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 bing. It's all this patter constantly. And even the robots are funny. The droids are funny. And oh my God. And we're having all these adventures. And there's these things that we hear called Jedis. They have the most amazing weapon in the history of cinema. And there's a farm boy from a desert planet who ends up becoming King Arthur and saves the galaxy and goes deeper into the ways of the Force. Then you meet Yoda, who's one of the all-time great characters. And they're just like, actually, they were all assholes. None of them could love. None of them could fuck. Yoda ping-ponged around a room. Bing, 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 bing. With a little tiny lightsaber. Yoda was beyond the need of a lightsaber because he was so strong with the Force. And to Kat's point, when we finally see the Jedi in action, they're cold, they're sterile, they're inhuman, they can't see what's directly in front of them. Obi-Wan Kenobi, they give him a line in Phantom Menace, the boy is dangerous. Why the fuck did you train him, Obi-Wan? That's what
he promised Qui-Gon he would. That's
Qui-Gon was a son of a bitch. Qui-Gon Jinn, if anybody is fucking a piece of shit Jedi, it's Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon Jinn is a dog shit character. And they remolded the entire Jedi Order in the likeness of Qui-Gon. Yoda, from the beginning, in the first movie, and in this one, realizes something is up here and there's something not right with this kid. And yet, because if Yoda, who's the all-knowing, all-seeing 900-year-old Jedi, would fucking say something, there's no Darth Vader. So he just doesn't say something. Not because there's a plot reason, just because there's scenes of him just literally observing Anakin and stroking his beard and watching the interactions between him and him flat out telling, Master, I will not do that. I will go with the girl. Fuck you, Obi-Wan. And Yoda's cut to Yoda was just like, something's not right there. Nothing is done. Nothing is done about this guy. And Obi-Wan is like, hey, look, you're obsessing about this woman. You got to keep her on the prize. There's a war starting here, kid.
It's the bureaucracy that's the problem. You know how much paperwork Yoda would have to fill out?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Just because you say that, see, the Jedi, because it was the high days of the Republic, and there was just bureaucracy blinded them from this very evil senator who's made himself.
The dark side of the Force clouds everything.
Oh,
it's literally the explanation.
There's one evil guy and 50 million Jedi.
And he's the most obvious evil guy.
He's the most obvious evil guy who's ever eviled. Nobody's eviled more than that guy. I'm going to name myself Supreme Chancellor.
Towards the beginning of the movie, where they're trying to figure out, like, Padme needs protection. They tried to kill her, obviously, and Palpatine's like, maybe a familiar face, like Obi-Wan Kenobi, Master Kenobi. He's coming back from this thing, and Yoda like side-eyes Palpatine, like, what the hell is he talking about?
Right, yes.
And that's as far as that concern went.
It's just nuts. Here's my point. Because this is a prequel series, we know where all of this is going. So somebody didn't create this out of whole cloth and go, well, we got nothing to go on. You already wrote the shit. You got everything to go on. And instead, you made, there was no reason to make any of these decisions with any of these characters. You could have made completely different decisions on every one of these prequel movies, and it would have gotten you to where you needed to go. It would
have just made more sense instead of being, and like they might have just been like, okay.
Well, famously, the Phantom Menace was written off of us for the first draft. Yeah. They produced the movie off a first draft that he wrote on a fucking legal pad.
That never happened.
He wrote on a legal pad. And every idea that he had, because he's the genius George Lucas. Here's the other thing. Everybody around him at this point in his career at Lucasfilm were like 30 years younger than him.
So they were probably just the fanboy kind of thing.
Yeah. He had almost none of the original crew. Nobody remembers he didn't direct two of these shits. He didn't write two of these shits. It was his idea. Other people wrote, directed, and edited these movies. And there was like, well, George, he's the visionary. No, he's not. He didn't do any of it. It was his initial idea. Han Solo was supposed to be a fucking frog. That was his idea. Like, Han Solo was originally written to be a Gungan, pretty much. If you look at the original drawings, it was bonkers.
You know what it is? It's like there was an Indiana Jones style boulder at the top of a hill. Lucas pushed it, and there's people standing in the way of it, being like, "I'm sure it'll be fine." He knows what he's doing.
It's 100%. Nobody could say anything. And I was like, "Well, that doesn't really make sense." Like, and there's behind the scenes video of people trying and going, that doesn't really make sense. And then I just explain it away because of the Force. And they're all like,
it's like poetry.
Yeah. He's like, oh, it's like poetry. It rhymes. They're like, oh, okay, George. All right. Yeah. Okay. It's your vision. And then they're just happy to be there. And who wouldn't be? I get it. Like, of course, who wouldn't want to work on Star Wars? Like, you get to build the special effects for the, George Lucas is going to spend $1 billion to invent new cameras and a whole new way of shooting movies, which unfortunately,
I think that's hopefully the legacy too. Is like it's bled into other movies, like the effects part of it that we don't know.
Yes.
We wouldn't. I don't. Well, we probably don't know.
The legacy is every time you see Mark Ruffalo's head photoshopped into a Hulkbuster, and you're like, that was like dog shit. When you watch Ant-Man Quantumania and you're like, none of this is in a real space.
Was this like the most, like the first major like franchise that was all blue screen, like you see behind the
scenes? Yeah, I guess it's like good and bad. Yeah.
Because even Yoda,
I'm taking that back, but like
Phantom Menace is probably 60-40 practical to digital.
Yeah.
This is the last puppet that we have for Yoda until I think Last Jedi. He's a puppet again.
Yeah.
He looks completely better.
You're like, way better.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I've said enough. I'm sorry, everybody. All right.
Tell us how you really feel.
Never again. Moving on to 2002's Spider-Man. It currently has a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Who am I? I'm Spider-Man.
Critics are calling Spider-Man absolutely amazing, unforgettable, wondrous to behold. 4 stars. Thumbs up. Pure spun gold. Spider-Man is an action-packed blast. It's incredible. You have to see this movie to believe it. Spider-Man, rated PG-13. Now playing in theaters everywhere.
Spider-Man was directed by Sam Raimi. It was written by David Koepp of Jurassic Park fame. It's a triumph return of all of these people because I've already covered Spider-Man. But I want to give a special shout out to the late, great Bill Nunn. Not seen since the days of Sister Act. This film was released May 3rd, 2002, on a budget of $139 million. It made $825 million, outpacing Star Wars. Sam Raimi does his best Richard Donner impression to tell the story of Tobey Maguire blasting rope.
I have Marvel's Mickey Mouse finally swings to the big screen, accidentally kickstarting the MCU.
Oh, the one where Mary Jane is just the damsel in distress.
That's all of them.
It is. It really, literally is.
Yeah. But this one felt more, I don't know. I remember it differently when I watched it originally. Although that's just like one qualm. I actually really enjoyed this one. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Can we say respectfully this is the best Uncle Ben and Aunt May?
Yeah. They always, this is the first one I saw, like I think, or it was like the first one. I don't know. But I always have a soft spot for these.
Is this the best casting of any Spider-Man movie ever made? In the supporting roles with J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson and Willem Dafoe as Osborn. Yes.
I mean, we're now 20 years later. They're still like, we can't top Willem Dafoe's Norman Osborn. We can't top J.K. Simmons.
Yeah.
J. Jonah Jameson. I think some of the other roles they've improved upon maybe over the years. We could debate about, some of the other characters, but
are you talking about Elizabeth Banks as Betty Brant? Because I think she's great.
I do think Elizabeth Banks is
Octavia
great,
Spencer was in here.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many people.
There was like OG that now are awesome in their own right. So
the late great Macho Man Randy Savage.
It's so good.
I got you for 3 minutes. 3 minutes of playtime. Yeah.
He's so good.
Great.
He's great. Yeah. That's not how pro wrestling works. You don't just show up at an arena and one guy wrestles
I didn't think so.
Random people from the crowd for 5 hours.
They gave it a lot of credit.
In a steel cage made of rubber. Ironically, pro wrestling, the steel cage is actually made of steel. Okay, so Uncle Ben, let's start here. Uncle Ben 100% believes that Peter is practicing self-abuse in his room. Right? Like I gotta take a drive with this boy.
He went through exactly the same thing at his age.
Yeah, so he's literally it's puberty. I understand. He's like, I'll talk to the boy. I'll have the talk with him.
Yeah.
That belief that Peter can't quit masturbating in his room gets him killed. In Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, Uncle Ben dies because he thinks Peter Parker is jerking off too much.
It's awfully judgy of Uncle Ben. Why would it find too much?
I didn't take it as a judgment. I just took it as maybe eat a meal. Come down with the family. You're just constantly in this room making weird noises and shit up there. You're scaring your aunt, you know.
Doing weird experiments.
Yeah. Maybe just wash
weird
your own socks from now on, Pete. You know, that kind of a thing. They were finding goo all over the room. We can't quite explain. Like, it's just a thing. And I'm sort of being facetious, but I'm not really, because when you really watch it, that's what really happens. He's like, well, it's puberty. I'll talk to him. You know, I'll have the talk with him.
Raging hormones.
Raging hormones. Yeah, I'll talk to him. And he dies because of it. He dies because of 40-year-old Tobey Maguire going through puberty.
He dies because Peter brushes him off.
Yes.
I thought it was more that. I mean, you can read into it, like maybe that part from Uncle Ben.
He would never get in the car, though, unless.
Yeah, I just thought it was more like he was just trying to check on him in the sense of, like, I think we all go through those teenage weird, especially back in the 2000s. It's like we didn't talk about our feelings or anything, and it was just like, and then for Uncle Ben to just actually want to know, like, you know, they're very understanding of, like, this kid that they had to take in as their own. And when I was watching, I was like, oh, Peter, you're so lucky, you know, like not everyone gets this kind of thing, but of course you're a teenager, so you don't understand that. So he was just being like the teenage rebel. You were like, oh, I hate you, mom and dad, you know, that kind of thing.
You're not my dad.
And even it's funny too, because seeing Peter, like, he's essentially doing everything right. Like, he's a smart kid.
Yeah. He's
wanting to go to college. He kind of has a plan. They never really, in this movie, they never really talk about, like, any of those details, which is funny to me. Like, and it would be kind of boring too, of, like, how are they going to pay for it if they can't even afford this, you know? Uncle Ben's job, he's laid off, but they have a really nice house. Like,
well, I assume they're old, so I assume they live in that house
they paid
forever,
off.
so
Yeah,
they paid
but
the house off.
I try not to think about those things because it gets, like, the little details, but I'm also like, oh, that's really nice. So, you know, he's looking to the future in that aspect. So it's always funny to see, like, even, I think because I was in those shoes, like, I would get straight A's and things, and then, like, you still have those issues, like, well, I'm doing everything I can, you know, I just want to go out, and, like, obviously he wants to do Spider-Man stuff, but then they're like, hey, like, what are you doing? And you're like, so I felt more of it this time in that sense, just like being a bratty teenager, and also having this power where he doesn't even know what to do with, and you're still developing. So, and he just had to learn it the hard way to not be an asshole.
Well, that's how boys had to learn about sex back then. Everything you just said, you could apply to a teenage burgeoning sexuality in the early 2000s, right, Robert? That we just had to learn. Nobody taught us. We had to learn it the hard way. We had to learn not to be assholes, right?
It's true. Sometimes you have to skip some meals to your craft.
So which is worse? Robert? That your loving elderly uncle is gunned down because you want to be a wrestler, but he dies in the belief that you toss yourself off too much, or your loving elderly uncle is gunned down because you are tossing yourself off too much? What's worse? He doesn't believe you are, but you are, or he dies because he believes you are and you're not.
I don't think he needs to know that. I think we're leaning towards that one. Yeah.
I see.
He doesn't need to know.
The truth is, though, that Uncle Ben actually dies because Peter Parker is lusting after the kind of crummy girl who lives next door to him. Because Mary Jane sucks in these movies, and in particular in this one, she sucks. And there's like, well, she has a broken home. She's still a shitty person. She's still crummy. There's no relationship. The thing that really stuck out to me this time and would have enhanced this movie is they grew up next door to each other. They seem to have no relationship until he's taking out the garbage. It would have made more sense.
It's like
that.
Yeah, it's like cordial at best. Like, oh, hey, how are you doing?
It would have made more sense had they grown up together. He's had this lifelong crush, and she sees him as a brother figure, the boy next door. Oh, he's so friend zoned in her mind. She can't see him as anything else. But that's nice guy Peter Parker. He's just the boy next door. And that's kind of how the animated series, if those of us that are real elderly that remember that in the 90s, that's how it played it. They lived next door in the same neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And I think she lived with an older aunt and that was friends with Aunt May. I think that's how it was. And Aunt May always wanted them to be together, but Peter was too shy. And Mary Jane was always this free spirit. Mary Jane is always like in every other medium except for this one comes off as like, well, I don't want to be tied down. I had to come from but dad was an asshole. I don't want to be tied down. I want to have a career, and that's what I want to do. And I just want to have fun. And so she's very friendly, and sometimes they could be taken as flirtatious, and sometimes she's very flirtatious, and that's okay. This Mary Jane doesn't really have a personality, and what we see of her personality is kind of shitty. she ends up just sort of dating Harry, who she's clearly not interested in, for his money. Like, Willem Dafoe is not wrong when Norman's like,
she's
not interested in him.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's for the money.
I don't think it's for the money. The way I see it, and Kat, I want to.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, no, go.
She's coming from a broken home. Has low self-worth. She's seeking validation by dating the popular kid or the rich kid, people that are perceived a higher class than her, or more accepted by her peers. And I think that's more why she is dating Flash, why she's drawn to Harry. And it's, I think it's, I don't think it's the materialism.
Well, that's
thing.
very articulate, but you're both wrong. It's the
Kat, what do you think?
What do you think, Kat?
No, I think it's the low self-esteem, and also from what we get from both of them is that they're not coming from any wealth, so she's gonna have to make her way into the city, in whatever way she thinks. So I do think it's just she's trying to tie her way, I don't know, like her self-worth with another person, but it's obviously the wrong one. And it's weird because in this one I hadn't noticed before, but she really doesn't want to do that, because other ones, like, if you have these characters that are like clinging on to the guy with money, or the dude who's a douchebag, they're like, they don't see it until it's like really they do like this one pivotal thing.
Yeah.
But even like, she's with Joe, the other jock or whatever, the Joe Manganiello now, like the hot
Flash
guy.
Thompson.
Flash Thompson. And like it's almost like she's in pain to even be with those people. Like, she doesn't like being with those people, but it's like she thinks, like, because I guess the thing that this movie really just puts her in a corner is that she's pretty, and that's the only thing she has kind of going for her, because we never know if she's smart or anything, or she wants to be an actress, but we never see her do anything with that. So
she does like bear her midriff a lot.
Yeah, she does. But she only like, that's all they put her to. So I think she also realizes like that's maybe the thing she has going for, which is really sad. But it was also of like the 2000, like that era, I think, to she's only with those guys because I think she's like, well, that's all I can do, and then she has low self-worth because of her family situation, the dad telling her she's like nothing, whatever. And then even like you were saying with the Peter stuff, like, it was really weird. Like, I wish they would have, and it would have just needed like a little bit of like,
just a little bit.
Hey, it's nice to see, like, because it doesn't make sense, because she's like, oh, stop bullying them. So you would think like, oh, it's because he's my neighbor and I know her and I know
we grew up
him
together.
Yeah, but like then she kind of ignores him too. So it's just weird that they like never really talked before, or they never really like pinpoint what their relationship was before.
Yes.
Right.
It's just sort of, we see it through his eyes. And then also it feels weird because with Peter, it almost feels like he only likes her and lets her kind of be mediocre in a way because she's pretty.
Yes.
It's like,
but
it's like a tale as old as time.
Yeah.
Like it's a tale as old as time though, like pretty girl, whatever. And then you idealize her in your mind. So he probably thinks she can do no wrong, but seeing it from this time, it was like, oh, like what did he even like? Cause he was smart and doing all this kind of stuff. And so it was like, he was just kind of letting her slide by too. I don't know.
No, you're right. She's mid.
Yeah.
Mary Jane is mid in this movie. Can we talk about her cultural
which is
appropriation?
fine, but it's just weird. Yeah.
She loves to appropriate culture.
Oh, the World Unity Festival?
The horrible, horrible World Unity Festival. That entire set piece is the worst part of the movie. It looks like a Universal Studios ride. It's just like, we're having this festival and oh no, something's gone wrong. It's totally a Universal Studios ride. Can we talk about?
And then even Harry like does those comments to her, like, you should have worn the black dress. Like,
my
that's all
dad
she is,
really
just
likes
a set piece.
Yeah. MJ and Harry are both just living their lives trying to impress the people around them.
Yeah.
He's trying to get his dad's approval, and she's trying to get I don't know, Harry's approval, anybody's approval.
Harry wants his dad to want to sleep with Mary Jane, which eventually he does. So there you go. Can we talk about the Mars attack death scene of the board where they all just turned into cartoon skeletons like Mars attacks? That was weird.
That was awesome, though.
Can we talk about how this movie is basically nothing else but Superman 78 plus Darkman? So much of this is just reused from Darkman.
I mean, that sounds pretty good, though, Jason.
Can we talk?
It is really simple. It is really simple after being like 20 plus Marvel movies and then seeing this one.
It's almost refreshing, right?
It was, it was.
100%.
And then it felt it doesn't have like the shine and CG. Like there is CG in this, but it
Not
just
quite
still
there.
feels
We're not quite there
yeah,
yet.
it feels
Yeah.
gritty. It actually feels like it's its own character. Like it doesn't feel like anything else, like, or like it doesn't just feel like another off the assembly line, like they were trying to do something. And it really sets, like, I think the simplicity was like took me aback. I was like, oh yeah, because I, in my mind, watching this back when I was a kid, it's like a lot of shit happened, like those fighting scenes were amazing, whatever. And I was like, oh, he just does a few slingshots through like the web, does a few flips. him and the Osborn character, like
Green Goblin.
What's his Green Goblin? Like they have a showdown, but it's like just really basic.
He
but
webs
like
his mask and he's like,
and it was just
the
but
one
then,
thing that can't.
but it was so simple in that way that I really enjoyed it, and I kind of love it. I loved it.
I will say the effect that held up the best and looked the best is when we get the perspective shot of when Goblin throws the bomb. And it blows up in Peter's face and blows his mask open. You see
so
in the eye. I was like, God damn, does that look good? And he goes through the wall, and I was like, okay. And like a couple of those flips towards the end looked good, and I thought, okay, all right, that looks good. Some of the other, we got the Rubber Man stuff that just Spider-Man moves in such an unnatural way to begin with. That even in the Marvel ones where the CGI is noticeably better, he's always going to look weird. Because this is like a dude who just can bend however the fuck he wants to fly through the air.
But it was 2002, so I also gave it leeway. Like I still prefer like that. Pretty much holds up to like the CG stuff now. Like the CG is better now, but like it's not like
it's doing less.
It's still because it's like a lot of practical mixed in with CG.
I was just about to say
and then I think maybe Green Goblin gave us like the problem that we have with the villains now is like he was just so good where he had the dimension of William Dafoe, like in that mirror scene, it's amazing when he's like, just kind of like himself is just going back and forth.
It's just him in the mirror.
One of two movies on our list that has a scene very similar to that.
And so it was just like
arguing with itself.
And I was just like, it's no wonder we're always like, where's the Green Goblin? Because we now have these just fluffy villain characters, and we get a few. Like I always mention Killmonger because he's like my favorite of the duality of like good, bad, mixed. You don't really know, and like Osborn too. I was like, oh, I actually feel for him in that sense. So I think it kind of gave us a good foundation of like, hey, we should demand more from our villains than just the one dimensional that always doesn't follow. But
Robert, as someone who's covered this series, I'm going to ask you a question. You're our resident Spider-Man expert.
I guess so. Okay.
How does not one classmate, wrestling promoter, or wrestling spectator remember Peter Parker as Spider-Man? Peter Parker punches Flash Thompson down the hallway after doing a flip 9 feet in the air out of nowhere.
Steroids.
And then very shortly thereafter, Spider-Man appears. Nobody remembers that? Nobody puts that together? I mean, in a world without superheroes? This isn't the MCU.
Can you also say that about young Clark Kent running around Smallville for 10 years on the CW and then putting on a different costume and a pair of glasses? And they're like, wait a minute.
CW shit doesn't count because all that stuff is junk. In the 70s, it would have worked because those townies would have stayed in town. They had no internet. Right. So who are they going to communicate with?
There you go. So then pick a different version of Superman then.
Okay.
Because he doesn't put the glasses on until he gets to Metropolis.
That's true.
Most versions, as far as I'm aware.
And also we have to imagine that Peter Parker was like just insignificant to everybody. So they probably forgot at the moment that happened and just considered him a freak.
Yeah. My biggest problem with this movie, I really enjoyed watching it again. I did not like it when it originally came out. I liked it better this time. I've seen it off and on throughout the years. I've covered it before in the show way back when. My biggest problem remains Mary Jane. The lack of the prior relationship context between her and Peter. Mary Jane never develops beyond being a superficial, vain sort of character. Her character is never fleshed out to us in a way that we understand why she does what she does. Other than, well, she's pretty. She's got big boobs and a midriff, and you see the top of her underwear because it's 2002 and everybody's underwear was creeping out of their pants. Low-rise jeans. And so I can't really root for their relationship in this movie because I don't understand what binds them. And it ends up having the effect of making Peter seem like a superficial person, to Kat's point, because what is there that he likes about her? What does he actually love about her other than she's the hot girl next door? Don't get me wrong, Kirsten Dunst, 2002, very hot. But what else? Does she have thoughts? Does she have emotions? Does like other than being sad? Like what? Like
she wants to act on stage,
and she's horrible. We get like the joke is that Mary Jane is horrible, right?
Well, the soap opera said she needed acting lessons.
Yes.
So
yes.
probably, I think that's the implication.
I got a lot of questions with this movie. I'm going to continue asking them to both of you. I need to know who those children were at the bridge in the middle of the night in the satin jackets at midnight in New York City. Why was there a field trip of like a little league baseball team going across the bridge in the middle of the goddamn night in New York? Where are they going? Where were they from? Who are they?
I don't know. Not from New York, so I don't know.
Were you aware?
Taurus.
Were you aware when you were younger and you watched this that the Green Goblin's glider clearly goes into the balls of Osborn? When you look at where it lands on him, the blades are right through his balls.
It always struck me as like right above the genital area, like below the waist.
Whatever
right above,
whatever the situation,
it's definitely in there. It's hitting some reproductive organs of some sort.
His genitals are mutilated by that glider.
Something's getting messed up.
So in the third film, when Henderson, the creepy butler who was not a character until the third film, I mean, he's in the background, but he starts to speak. He's like, I found him. I dressed his wounds. Those were definitely wounds by the hand of his own. He died by the hand of his own glider.
Yeah, I hate that.
What we're talking about is okay, let's rewind here. What's Osborn Jr.'s name? Harry? You're Harry Osborn.
Harry.
Yeah.
You're Osborn Jr. You walk in. Spider-Man. A guy in a S&M suit. Let's be real. Basically, all masked up, very fetishistic, is carrying your dad, who appears to be asleep, completely in the nude. Lays your nude dad's body down on a lounge sofa. You go to your nude dad and have to take the blanket he's wrapped off of him, which is going to fuck you up enough in the head as a kid. And then all you see are the remains of his mutilated genitals. What do you think Spider-Man has done to your father?
That's why Harry's so mad at the very beginning of the second movie. He's like, what the hell?
Right.
I've seen some shit, Pete.
100% believes that Spider-Man and his father had a DL kink relationship.
And went too far.
And it went way too far. And Spider-Man completely blew out his genitals and then dumped his body. What else would you gather from that? And when the butler's like, I cleaned him up, I saw his genitals. His genitals were destroyed by his own hand, not Spider-Man.
Not impressed.
Yeah. I never occurred to me before that based on the trajectory of that glider, and we see him. It is at below waist level.
Yeah.
Why? Why did it have to be so low, Sam Raimi? That's what I want to know. Here's what's good about the movie. The casting is right, the tone is right, but still, this movie to me feels more like a proof of concept that is yet to be perfected. There's another movie in this trilogy that will, I think, take all the good of this and perfect it, and it's the third one.
I was just about to say.
So
you beat me to it.
What remains to talk about Spider-Man? What are your scores? What are your ranks? Robert, we'll start with you.
Okay. So I think this is probably, for me, still the de facto origin story for Spider-Man. I feel like you can nitpick on certain elements of the characters or the Green Goblin story or whatever, but the origin of Spider-Man, the Uncle Ben, the great power comes great responsibility, all of the wrestling, like all of that, I feel like this has captured it so well that there's not really a reason to ever do it again. And the way that Richard Donner did with Superman and the way that Nolan did in Batman Begins with explaining how that character got to be who they are. So I'm, it frustrated me a decade later when they did basically the exact same thing with Andrew Garfield. Cause I'm like, I don't need this. Like we know Spider-Man, move on. Got it. So I think that this movie still kind of holds that mantle for me as like the definitive Spider-Man origin story. I think Sam Raimi is such a genius fit for this because he balances that earnestness and the camp of this character of this world in such a beautiful way that really pays off as we were sort of alluding to in the second movie. And you got Tobey Maguire in full aw shucks kind of Pleasantville mode
Mm-hmm.
here as Peter Parker. I think that was really strong. You get some of the horror DNA of Raimi with the Goblin and some of the jump scares and all of that. It is, the relationship I think could have been better between MJ and Peter, definitely. The visuals, I think, are dated in places, but mostly okay because of what Kat said. There is that practical effects. You see the glider wobble around, but then when it starts like charging towards Spider-Man, that's a practical glider on a rig being dragged across a set. That kind of thing, I think it really holds up. Danny Elfman's score is amazing. I even like the Chad Kroeger song that goes in the credits, Hero, which I think is pretty solid for the era that this came out. And it was such a phenomenon when this film came out. It was the first movie to make over 100 million at the that weekend, opening weekend. So it was such a big deal when it came out. And I think for me, still holds up. It's not obviously my favorite Spider-Man movie. I think that's probably still either between Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Verse, the Into the Spider-Verse. But it's still second of the week for me, and I give it an 8.2.
Kat, final thoughts, final rank, final score?
Yeah, I think having the perspective after all these Marvel movies, which we didn't know was going to happen at that time, I really appreciated the simplicity of it. And maybe that's sort of a little bit of giving it a scale based on what we have now. But I do think it holds up. And I think there is something to be said about being the first one as well, because like Robert mentioned, the origin story, like every time I think of Spider-Man and the origin, I always think of this one. I always think of the little spider biting him. And so it's like ingrained in my head. So I do think there's something, fun and special about that. And yeah, the MJ thing is more of like, just because I've grown into, like the world has changed. And I think maybe if it had been made now, just like it has been, like, with the updated version, MJ has more agency and she's more of a full-fledged character. So back then, I guess I'll give it just a little bit of leeway. That's just what society was giving those characters. But I still don't like it. But it's just sort of a small thing, because I think this one also really focuses on Peter and his struggle. Yeah. And I think that's why it holds up more than just if it had been more focused on the other characters, I think it wouldn't hold up today. But it's really just Peter's coming into his own, who he wants to be, the uncle relationship, making sure he's kind of being a good person, and I think that's it's still heartwarming in that sense. And then I think Tobey Maguire just plays it so well. He's dorky, but then you can kind of believe that he can be this hero, and and then there's just I just love the practical mixed with the CG. So I also gave it a second ranking, and it's 7.8 out of 10 for me.
Okay. I think what they're trying to do, 7.8, you said?
Yes.
Okay. To give them a little bit of leeway, I think what they're trying to do is they are trying to cast Mary Jane almost as this, by having her removed and not as fully fledged of a character, because it is from Peter's perspective. Like you said, Kat, we're kind of seeing her through his eyes, because it's very obvious that he idealizes her, because we see her kind of, she's like a waitress and she's like a shitty actor, and he's like, well, you're a great actor. And like we're kind of seeing both the idealized version of her, the real version of her, and the distance between them, and therefore the distance that Peter has to go, and the sort of person he has to become, and the fates that have to align for them to connect like they do at the end. So in the end, when he makes the classic Spider-Man decision not to allow himself to love her, that has an emotional payoff. So I get what they're doing. I just wish that we could have seen a little bit more from Peter's perspective of why he liked her, but I get it. Okay, moving on. It's time to talk about Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, the second in the Harry Potter series, which currently has an 82% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Commercial alert! Commercial alert!
Are you in constant bondage by the chains of Satan? Do the forces of fear, depression, anxiety, and drugs have you bound? If so, then pray to the Prawn God. A benevolent force that repels all sins, the Prawn God will visibly patrol the sky above your home in exchange for small fish and invertebrates. And coming soon, strengthen your prawn bond with this cassette tape that discusses the 8 tenets of prawn. Cleanliness is prawnliness. Ingest of the brine.
We ingest the brine in order to shine.
Devoutness shall be rewarded with a ride on the prawn.
Almighty prawn, we lick your shell and pray it remain strong.
And much, much more. Worship the prawn god today and wash away the dirty sins of your past. Order now while supplies last.
On November 15th,
there's some wizards who think they're better than everyone else.
Scared, Potter. You wish.
When you stand by your friends.
Eat slugs.
You okay, Ron?
And stand up for what you believe in.
Harry Potter must go home.
Nothing can stand in your way.
Let's go.
It is not our abilities that show what we truly are. It is our choices.
Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Rated PG. The second year begins November 15th.
Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets was directed by Chris Columbus. It was written by Steve Kloves. It's a triumphant return of all these people because I've already covered this entire franchise. It was released November 3rd, 2002. On $100 million, it made $879.8 million. Harry Potter and the Chamber of... I don't remember a fucking thing about this movie. I covered this entire franchise. Did not remember this one. Fired it up. I'm like, I don't remember any of this. Except for like the flying car. Watched the entire movie. Within a couple of days since, before we're recording this. I sit here before you with empty notes. I don't remember a goddamn thing about this movie. I remember Peter talks to snakes. There's a prophecy about Slytherin.
You mean Harry?
Harry. Yeah, okay.
That's your point proven.
Yeah.
Point
it's
proven.
Another kid with glasses, all right? It's another dork with glasses. Peter Potter. Peter Potter has a prophecy. He may be the bad guy. Kevin Branagh, who plays Perot, is another dark arts teacher who's trying to kill him and turns out to be a bad guy. And there's a snake, and there's the sorting hat, and there's a flying car, and Hagrid is really lovely, and I don't remember anything else about this movie. So I'm going to kick it over to you, Kat, because this is your jam. This is your bread and butter. This is your Star Wars. Nothing has mattered to you more other than Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. You lead us off, and then we'll go over to Rob.
What's funny is that I think the second one is really a second movie of any trilogy or long standing series is really hard because you need to capture the heart of the first movie, and then you need to progress. And sometimes it's just kind of a stepping stone, unlike one of the other movies that we're going to talk about shortly. So this one, I enjoy it, but it's actually when I do several of my rewatches a year, it's always the one I'm kind of like, oh, I want to forward it because it's kind of just there. Like it needs to happen to kind of progress some things. Like we need to introduce Dobby, who ends up being a very pivotal character later. Build upon the relationship between the three main characters, introduce a few, of the other characters, and a little bit more world building. But I also love it in the sense that it's sort of the film before it just starts taking a different turn. So if you love the first one, and I still want to feel that like nostalgic, just being a little kid, it's before it gets really dark, I watch this one. If I'm like, oh, I just want to get to the dark stuff, I go to the third one because that's when Alfonso Cuarón comes in and really changes everything, which I also have feelings on. But it's sort of it's the in between, so you kind of get a little bit of it's just like a middle child. It's weird, even though it's like the second one, because the other ones become more of like the 4 through 7 have their own identity that is pretty like mixed in. So this one's like sort of in between, but I don't know. I think it has cool elements. I think I love the flying car. I have the Lego set of that. I love the basilisk, the Tom Riddle. Learning more about that, and then
this is the Tom Riddle. This is the journal, Tom Riddle's journal. Is that this one?
Yeah. So we learn more. We learn more about Voldemort. So there's things that really do need to happen here that kind of will
Thank you for reminding
me. Are pivotal. that are in the second one or in the upcoming ones, and I think we see more of the Quidditch and things like that. So I think it's good. I just I think in all of them, it's not necessarily my favorite. Favorite, with a big, I love all of these, but if I have to like pick my favorite, it's not as my favorite as like the first one that's very nostalgic and sets up the one. It's sort of like I feel like those kind of blend a little, and it's not doing anything too new. It's just it's sort of like, yeah, we're just in our second year of Hogwarts and we kind of know people and we're getting to, you know, it's also kind of one of those things too, where I think it's nice to kind of get to know them a little bit more. So then when everything else happens, you really do feel connected. Cause I don't think we can kind of skip this part to go to the other parts. Cause I think that would just be too hasty and it wouldn't make sense.
No, I agree.
Down the road,
because we start to get real plot heavy.
Yeah.
From 4 through 7, it gets, like you said, darker. The stakes get higher, it becomes more dangerous. And we need to, the plots are so intricate in those movies. We need to focus on that. So we need the characters pre-established before we go down that path. And you know what's so funny is the idea of spoilers, but the idea of like capturing through a magic a younger version of yourself and putting your young self in a journal and then, or you know, and like
it's kind of fucked up. Yeah,
it's really interesting, and it's one of my favorite. That's one of my favorite things of the Harry Potter, and I just watched it, didn't remember it. And I know, and like, here's the thing: I don't dislike the movie. I do think it's a little long.
Yes,
I don't dislike it. It's just it's not a lot happens in a sense. But
like
it's all set up.
Everything you saw, but then it makes sense later.
Yes.
And then I love Lucius Malfoy, who you know, I love that the actor
Jason Isaacs.
He's amazing, and I feel like that also brought a little bit more. You see, like the darker side of the wizards that may, you know, you obviously know at the end of this, he catches him with the sock and letting Dobby go free, so you kind of know that. Although Malfoy is sort of like, you know, flimsy there, you do know that his dad is like effed up.
This is before they introduced the concept of Death Eaters. I think that's the next one, right?
Yeah, Azkaban, both on the plot level, tone level, and then the direction of Caron is where it becomes visually way more interesting. And he's doing all kind of stuff with the way he moves the camera through the space of Hogwarts. Hogwarts becomes kind of scary. As opposed to like, oh, it's Hogwarts, chocolate frogs. It's like real. It starts to feel real. The world of the wizarding world starts to feel dangerous in the next film. And ironically, I was like, oh, okay, Azkaban's the next one. I was like, all right, that's great. Like, I like that one, so I can't wait to fire that one up. And I went, Chamber of Secrets. That's the second one. And I was like, "What is this? The one where Robert Pattinson dies? No, that's Goblet of Fire. Which one's Chamber of Secrets? Is that the one with the spider?" And then I fired it up, watched it. I was like, I don't remember any of this. Kind of remember the flying car. Watched it through. Really wanted to fast forward the middle.
Yeah, it has that thing.
I was like, I get 20 minutes further down the road. Like, nothing's moving. Robert, what are your thoughts?
So there's two ways to evaluate this one, and you guys kind of touched on both. There's one. If you view it as a standalone, then everything is very similar to the first one. It's kind of hampered by sort of like what Kat was saying. Another year at Hogwarts. Oh, back to Diagon Alley. Oh, we need to fix Hermione needs to fix Harry's glasses. There's constant callbacks to, oh, remember last time? We're going to do that again. Let's do Quidditch. Let's watch Harry catch the snitch and all this other stuff. That it's also the last bastion for them actually being in classes that have nothing to do with anything. Like there's so much in this that is, you can feel the chapter breaks like every 5 minutes. And then chapter 6, the Cornish Pixies. What the hell does that have to do with anything? There's a lot of that in here. This did not need to be 2 hours and 40 minutes long. They completely dropped the whole the point system after this movie. Basically, it gets like a name drop here and there, like 10 points to Gryffindor. We never hear about that again because they beyond this they stop being so slavish with the source material, and they're like, well, we're taking this out. And I'm sure Kat has feelings about certain things that were taken out and certain explanations in there later on, particularly with the map. I know they never explained the origin of the Marauders map in the later films, which I think was a misstep. But yeah, if you look at it as part of the saga, then it introduces some characters we need to know. But other than Tom Riddle's diary being, retroactively a Horcrux, there's not really a whole lot of stuff here that bears weight on the rest of the saga. I do love my synopsis was going to allude to the fact that it feels like a weaker film than the first one because it's just repeating a lot of the same beats, but it's still, the mystery is still pretty fun. It goes a little bit darker, and all the supporting players that they bring in. I think Kenneth Branagh is fun as Lockhart. I think Julie Walters is so great as Molly Weasley. I think that's a huge one. And Shirley Henderson is Moaning Myrtle. I find her really funny, and it brings a totally different energy to these movies. So I'm like you guys, like I enjoy it, but it's one of the least essential films in this saga. So it's just like when they're rolling up to Hogwarts and Ron says, "Welcome home" to Harry. I'm like, exactly. And that's exactly what Chris Columbus was going for.
Yeah.
Like, look, come back to Hogwarts and hang out for another adventure.
Yeah.
And he's a good enough filmmaker to make that work. But if they hadn't changed directors or drastically did something with the third one, this series would have petered out like Narnia did, I think. Because you can get away with that once, and it works for this movie. And I really love the whole, the whole ending with the music swelling and Hagrid and everything, and that's really moving and sweet. I like all his sentimentality that Columbus brings to it. But yeah, they couldn't have done that a third time. It would have sunk this entire thing. We also get Richard Harris as Dumbledore for the last time. He passed away, I think, a month before this came out. So yeah, overall, I'm positive, but there's a lot of reservations.
And I also think,
did I ask you guys, who do you prefer in the Dumbledore role, Michael Gambon or Richard Harris?
I think they're both good. Sometimes I can't even tell the difference, from the, it's kind of seamless. So I think they both did really well.
Robert?
It was a little bit of a thing, like adjustment to get to the new one. So, but then once you're like in for the next 6 movies, you sort of like, you kind of like grow to love love him too.
I think Gambon is more fun because he gets to dig deeper into that character. These first two, Dumbledore is very like, it has like a regal presence, and he, but Gambon gets to play him more like he's kind of got a playful side.
Yeah.
He's like a little more mischievous, and Richard Harris didn't really get to toy with that too much in those first two. So I think it's probably Gambon, but just only because sheer fact of that he had 6 movies to flesh that character out and to show more dimension.
Yeah.
And I also think this also helps the main 3, because I think if they had tried to go too dark, like, in the third one, they have to dig a little deeper in their acting chops. And I do think they're sorting themselves out too, just as actors, and like getting to know each other. So like by the third one, when they are having to do a little bit more, I feel like they're kind of, because they do get better, like really, as they go on. So I do think if it had just skipped over this and just gone straight to the darkness, I don't think they could have done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what's your score? What's your rank for Harry Potter, the Chamber of Secrets? Kat, we'll start with you. Most important film series of your life.
Yeah. So this is my third one. Okay. So, and I gave it a 7.5.
Okay. Robert?
It's also my third. I had a 7.2. So pretty aligned with Kat.
Yeah, I think we're the same.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep. Okay, that leaves one more. The reason why both of you are making triumphant returns to this episode is because we're talking Lord of the Rings with 2 absolute Lord of the Rings fanatics and some guy who's just starting to like them for the first time in 20 years. That's me. Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, which was previously my favorite of the trilogy, currently has a 91% Rotten Tomatoes. We'll see if it's still held up for me.
This Christmas, the wait is over.
They're here. He wants it. I have made my choice.
There will be no dawn for men.
There is still hope.
The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, rated PG-13.
Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers was directed by Peter Jackson with a screenplay by Fran Walsh, Philippa Boyens, Stephen Sinclair, and Peter Jackson. It's a triumphant return of all of these people. Last seen in The Fellowship of the Ring. It was released December 5th, 2002, and a budget of $94 million. It made $947.9 million. A divided fellowship finds itself on the brink of war as the dark forces of Sauron gather. Robert, synopsis.
The quest to save Middle-earth continues in a middle chapter that enriches, expands, and improves on its predecessor in just about every way.
Kat, synopsis.
Press play on Helm's Deep over and over again.
Oh yeah.
Christopher Lee is playing the exact same character here as he did in Attack of the Clones, but I lack zero clarity, or I lack the confusion. I have perfect clarity on what his plan is and what his motivations are, even though they're equally as stupid here. He's cutting down trees to make Uruk-hai super ogres out of them through dark magic. He's now completely aligned himself with an Isengard with Sauron. Yeah, because he's Saruman. Sauron. And Mordor, and he wants to burn down Mystical Forest, and he gets a bunch of hillbillies to help him do it. And I totally understand it. I totally get it. I don't have to know about Master Sivo Rice or whatever the fuck his name was.
Sifo Dyas.
Yeah. Which is Sifo Dyas, which if you look it up, you're thinking it's Diaz, D-E or D-I-A-Z. It isn't. It's some fucking weird Star Wars spelling. That's Erasure. That's clearly the first Latino Jedi Master in history. He's cast as what? A gangster and an evil guy, and then they erase his name. It's fucked up. But here, in this all-white movie, got great villains. And I guess the ogres and Uruk-hai are blue-ish, so kind of. Yeah, I totally understand it. I think this movie really picks up in the second half, and it really picks up once Gandalf appears to Gimli, Aragorn, and Legolas. I watched the extended edition 4K of this, and that movie is about 2 hours too long. It's like 4 hours plus. It's like 4 hours and 20 minutes or some shit. It's too fucking long. Whereas the extended edition of the Fellowship of the Ring was perfect. It actually added a bunch of stuff. I thought, okay. And I just wanted it to keep going. I didn't want the movie to stop. I wanted this movie to stop after about 2.5 hours. I was like, oh God, can something happen? Because the pacing's all wrong. It's too spaced out. It takes too long to get to that epic and thrilling finale of Helm's Deep. There's way too much shit with the trees. And I love the trees, but I don't need 20 minutes of them standing around not talking. I just don't need that. The hard part this movie has, in this trilogy in particular, it has the heavy task of being the stake of the story. This is the meatiest part of the story of it. And so it doesn't quite have the joys of the Fellowship or the satisfaction, the payoff of Return of the King. It's an exceptionally well-made film. But it's also the kind of the most downbeat, because this is, until the end, they're getting their ass kicked. This is the hero's low in that epic storytelling format that we know so well. I do have a question. I don't mean to be so sexual in this episode, but I'm going to continue to be. Aragorn and Legolas definitely have their fans. Kat's one of them.
Yes.
Where are the Gimli guys? Where are the Gimli gals? Who wants to fuck Gimli? Is there anybody out there that's into dwarf play?
He's funny. So I think you appreciate the hotness when you're younger, but then as you get older, you want someone to make you laugh. So
he's got a great personality.
Talk about my day with Gimli. Yeah.
He's got a great personality, is attractive too. So I will say I like Gimli too.
Kat, cover your innocent ears. Gimli, of all of these people, Gimli eats ass. Gimli's in the back of the bakery.
Gimli looks like he'd eat just about anything.
Right, that's what I'm saying. 100% what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is Aragorn our last pure protagonist in film history? Is he our last true blue, through and through, always does the right thing protagonist? Not that he's not complicated, because he has emotions and feelings, and right. He doesn't make all the right decisions, but is he the last pure protagonist?
Well, I feel like a lot of people, even in this franchise, would say, well, they would apply it to Sam, but he's not the protagonist.
No.
There's a purity to that character, aside from, he's not giving Gollum any consideration whatsoever. That's a good question. I was even watching this movie now, trying to apply my Star Wars prequel trilogy protagonist handoff to this, and this pretty clearly feels like an Aragorn driven film.
Yes.
I think the other two, what really impresses me about this movie is that the way that they're able to balance these three stories, one of which is just Merry and Pippin escape, hang out with a tree for the rest of the story, and then destroy Isengard, and that's where they hang out until the third movie.
Smoke some
other...
weed, which actually isn't weed. It's just tobacco.
Yeah.
But
right, exactly.
They play it up like it's weed. Smoke some weed and then eat a bunch of food.
Exactly.
Dirty water chicken. A whole roast chicken they find in muddy water. Don't eat that.
They have limited resources. And then Frodo and Sam basically going around in circles where they're at the Black Gate and then they're like backtracking. They're a long way around. There's one story of these three that actually progresses in anything close to a linear fashion, and that's the Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli stuff. So, I mean, maybe that's a good thing to consider. I do love that character. I do love Aragorn, even though he falls victim to one of the things that this movie does, maybe once or twice too much, which is a character seems dead. We, the audience, and the other characters think they're dead, and then 5 minutes later, we see what really happened, and they reemerge. That happens a little bit more in here than I would have liked. But it's the editing that makes all those stories propel forward. Even though you stop and think about it, you're like, well, only one of these really had much happen.
What's funny is in Last Crusade, when Indy goes over the cliff with a tank or whatever it is, and they. Henry is mourning him because he thinks he's lost. He's like, I've lost my boy. And he's crying. And John Rhys Davies, Gimli, Sala is consoling him.
And Treebeard, too.
Yeah, and Treebeard is consoling him. And they're just all mourning him at the cliff. And it's played very straight. Like, Indiana Jones just died. Now, of course, there's about 20 minutes left in that movie, so we know Indy's not dead. And then Indy just sort of like walks up behind them and is completely disoriented and covered in dust, and his jacket's like half off, and he's like he's behind him, he's looking around, and he's missing the hat, and he looks over the cliff. The Aragorn death sequence, I swear to God, felt very similar to that, where it was like, I was expecting Viggo Mortensen to be like completely disheveled and like just appear behind them and wonder what they're looking at, and then, his elf necklace just to blow in the wind and get back into his hand. It's very similar, but instead we get like a weird astral projected Liv Tyler who breathes life back into him in the bed of a river. And he has and again, I saw the extended version, so I don't know if I don't remember what happens in theatrical. They go into an extended like flashback of him deciding that she should go off to the Isle of where elves die, where magic goes to die, or wherever the fuck they're going. Never Land. So I this is a very good movie. I wish I hadn't watched the extended cut, because I think I would have enjoyed it even more if I just watched the theatrical cut. Because it's just paced so... It's too much of a good thing in a way. It's just too much. It's too much.
Yeah.
This movie has my favorite scene in all of Lord of the Rings, though, and that is when he goes in to see what's his face? The king. Which king is this?
Theoden,
yeah. Hail Theoden, yeah. As Gandalf the Grey, and he's like possessed by Saruman.
One of my favorite scenes.
Yeah, and he does an exorcism. Yeah, and he's like, I release you. And he's like, and all of a sudden it's like way more of Palpatine than Palpatine even is in the Star Wars movie. He's like, your magic won't work here, Gandalf the Grey. And he just flips that fucking coat off, and he's like, the staff, I told you to take the wizard's staff. And then he's just like, it's so fucking cool, right?
Oh, yeah.
He's like, get out of here, you bitch. He keeps banging him into the throne. And he's like, oh, no. Yeah, it's great. It's the only thing better than that is like fucking Osborne being like, finish it. From evil. This era, 2002, was the movie year where they got elderly people to make caterwauling noises. We're from between Aunt May and Rosemary in that hospital bed going, oh, his eyes, oh. And then they keep, his horrible yellow eyes. And then here with Theoden, I'm like, It's just elderly people making caterwauling noises peaked in 2002. Bring back cinema. The movies died when we stopped casting old people to make goofy noises. That's my favorite scene in this movie. I love it. I think it's so great. I do like his emergence. I do like the reveal, and then the reveal where they play with the audio, where it's Christopher Lee's voice, but then it's not, and then it's kind of their voices blended together. And so you're like, oh shit, which one is this? Because we only know of one white wizard, I thought that was great. As a Gandalf guy, I love anything with Gandalf. I do think he's sidelined in most of this movie after he makes his reappearance. It does become Aragorn's story, very much so. And then the stuff with Helm's Deep, not all of it's aged well, digital effects wise, especially in the extended cut because it goes even longer there. But it's still one of the most impressive battle sequences of that decade, of the early 2000s, and probably the last 2 decades. It's just, it feels like there's real stakes. You have a sense of where all the characters are. There's still humor to it when Gimli's like, toss me. And he's like, what? Did I hear you correctly? He's like, yeah. And he's like, just promise me one thing. Don't tell the elf.
And they're keeping score.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was like,
continues into
he's twitching because my axe is buried in his nervous system. And he's playing with the axe and the guy's legs twitch. Yeah, it was great. There's more of a camaraderie between that triumvirate of Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas, because they're kind of at odds with each other in the first one. They're truly friends now here. They've been through hell and back, and it's about to get worse. And just I really like stories that have kind of moral questions to them. And the moral question here is, if you're Theoden, what the hell do? You come back out of essentially being possessed by a demon, and you don't remember the last several. You've exiled your nephew who's loyal to you. Your niece is almost getting sexually assaulted by a creepy worm tongue. Your kingdom is in tatters. You've lost so many men. You don't remember everything. You've been greatly diminished. War is now at your gates. 10,000 soldiers are already on the way to destroy your entire kingdom of super orcs. What the fuck do you do? And so when he was like, I don't have the resources to fight, I don't want anybody else to die. All these people died while I was asleep, essentially. I'm just going to hold us up in this place that's kept us safe before, which ends up just being a kill box. Like, what the fuck do you do if you're him? And when he's like, well, call on whatever. And he's like, this isn't the old days. The old alliances are dead. Like, who's going to come for me? Are the elves going to come and save me? Or the dwarves? Like, none of these magic fucking fairies are going to come and get me out of this jam. I'm fucked. We'll just have to let them destroy everything and we'll rebuild. Not realizing that, as Gandalf says, like, they're not here to ransack your village, or maybe Aragorn. They're here to end the days of men. They're here to wipe human beings off the face of the planet. And all that stuff is great, because what would you do, Kat, if you're Theoden? What the fuck do? You wake up, you're burying people, you're burning your son's body, or whatever he does. Maybe that's the next one. And people you loved are dead. Everything's in tatters. You don't know what the fuck to do. You're barely getting yourself dressed again, and you got to go to war. What do you do?
I mean, I think what he does is probably what we would all do.
Yeah.
Because he also has that, I really love Theoden's character, because I feel like he's one of the kings that really is, I guess, like, kind of old school, and really trying to do the right thing. He's not there because he just wants this power. We get that from Saruman and the others, and he's sort of probably what Aragorn would be, and probably maybe models eventually what he ends up being king. So just trying to do right by his people, but then also I guess he doesn't want to face the reality of what's actually happening too. So it's a little bit of he's doing what he thinks is right, but also kind of not listening to reason, because I think he already feels so much failure from being possessed by a worm tongue that and losing his son, and just being like, it would just be a shock. So like what he ends up doing, I think, is like what he thinks is right. And then he also is like reasonable, because like, when he finally realizes what's happening, I think he kind of gets on the Aragorn and Legolas bandwagon and like, okay, yeah, let's do this. He's not just like, we see the king in the next movie kind of just, he's lost all reason and he's in insanity and stuff. So I think it's a nice this movie sort of, it's weird because it's probably like my favorite in terms of like the action, because we hadn't seen anything like it. Like in the Fellowship, we see a little bit, and this one like just comes to a head with the Battle of Helm's Deep, which is like still one of the greatest battles, and I think is like a precursor to I kind of compare it to like maybe Game of Thrones, like Battle of the Bastards kind of battle, which they probably mimic this one, which is crazy because it's TV and this is like film. So for it to be so good, like, but obviously it's later years. So I think that's it also kind of, I think, set the tone where a lot of other movies in this fantasy world kind of try to mimic it, but since this is the first one, it's always really hard to do that. And then you get the cool like orcs and the ladders, and it's just like so intense for those moments. It's still one of my favorites, but then it's also mixed in with like, I have weird feelings because some of the tree stuff, even in the theatrical cut, is a little slow. And the Sam and Frodo stuff is a little slow, and like the and so like there's moments where I want to fast forward those like and just get to the battle. And it's weird for me because in other movies I would think like, oh, I don't like this movie as much as the other ones, but they still manage to be like, I know just as like as story wise to get to the other parts, you do need those characters. You do need that. It can't just be all battle, or I think it would have just lost all the substance, because we need to understand what's happening in the other world, like with the Ents and what's happened to them, which is kind of like an analogy to like climate change and things like that. Like just like destroying the earth. Industrialism from Tolkien's age, and then Saruman and stuff. So I think it's really, you see the scope of that we don't see in the Fellowship. And then with the Battle of Helm's Deep, you see the faces of men and like that there's, worth fighting for and that kind of thing. And then you see the elves that come in and help. And so there's, I think, sort of like Chamber of Secrets, it sort of feels like in between there's stuff that happens. Obviously this one's on a bigger scale, but it has to happen, and it kind of sets up a lot of stuff. But I think it's my favorite because it is in between. Like the first one starts it, this one just continues it. A lot of the stuff we get to see more of it, and then we know danger's on the way, but that means it's going to end. And the third one's always like bittersweet for me. So I feel like this one just kind of really ups the ante, and you're like, whoa, that was amazing. How can they even top that? And then it's just like they go on. So
they can't
I think it has those benefits.
They can't chuck Smeagol into that volcano fast enough for me though. God damn, this character.
Those are like my least favorite parts, which I mean, I love Smeagol as a character and I love I love it, but I just don't need to see it.
No.
But it needs to happen, or else, like, it's just one of those things you sort of got to go through.
What's hilarious, though, is Sam is wrong about everything in the first movie, but he's right about everything in this movie. All on the way, he's like, you can't trust him, Mr. Frodo. He'll throttle our necks while we sleep. And he's like, I'm going to throttle your necks while you sleep, Smeagol. Ah. And it's just like, and for some reason, Frodo's like, I pity him, Sam. He must follow us.
No. I love all that. I love that dynamic with the three of them. I think
you're wrong again,
is a
Robert.
Complex and interesting character. And I like that because Frodo is currently being worn down by the ring.
Yeah.
Gollum had it for, I don't know, centuries or whatever. Yeah. And so he's to the point that he's transformed into this beast, as we'll see at the opening scene of the following movie. Yeah. And he's clinging to the belief that there is redemption for Gollum, because he wants the redemption for himself. So it's a cautionary tale for him. So he pities him because he's like, I have to believe he can be saved, because otherwise what am I going to do when we're done with this? Because I'm going through the same thing.
Robert, hang on a second. Stuff. If you just keep bringing up themes and subtext and character motivation, makes it harder for me to tell you you're wrong. So stop it.
Or I'll
you're making too much sense.
Stop making so much sense. I'm right.
I mean, that's why these hold up so well, because even in the battle sequence, like I'm sure that, like, especially with Game of Thrones, there's a lot of battles that I love that mimic, like, are of the movie caliber, but like just watching it again, the reason why it holds up so well is because it's mixed in with the practicality. Not a lot of, like, obviously the orcs, the wide shots are CG, but you can't really, there's a few where you can kind of tell, but like it still pretty much holds up. And then there's a lot of the Peter Jackson did a really good job with like really zooming in on like, you know, like the close-ups of the battle, making sure we know what's going on. And also that's like a play on, because they couldn't do, it's the scope of the bigger shots is probably just too expensive. And that $94 million budget's so crazy to me, but and it still holds up. And so you get to see like those intimate moments even in the battle that it keeps it realistic, I think. And then that's what I think a lot of movies nowadays, they try to just do like the massive scope and it gets lost in the CG and you don't really care like who's fighting who, what's the perspective.
It's just
and with these, like
it's visual goof.
Yeah. And here you know there's like thousands of works, but sometimes I'm like, wait, how many people are actually there? Because it's just so intimate. And I'm like, wait, there's thousands of people in Helm's Deep, like because of that. Like it's sort of like a interesting thing because they keep it on the ground, which I think is why it holds up so well.
Yeah. And they set up the stakes by having, you know, our heroes observing the citizens of Rohan who are either too old or too young to be really fighting. And so that we get a sense of who is laying their lives on the line to defend that. And I love the dynamic between the two kingdoms of men that we get that this movie really sets up. It's alluded to in Fellowship, in the scene and the council, and then the relationship between Boromir and Aragorn. But here, like really digging into Rohan and meeting Éomer and Éowyn. And I think Bernard Hill as Theoden is like kind of one of the MVPs of this movie. Like he knocks everything out of the park, and he's kind of drives a lot of the story. But even with Faramir, and we sort of get like hints of the Gondor kingdom that we're going to really delve into in the next one. Like I love that the interplay between Gondor and Rohan, and are these two kingdoms of men going to rise up and unite against this evil? And I don't know. I'm a sucker for all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Would this movie have been?
It still holds up. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah. Exactly.
Would it have been better if it was directed by Brett Ratner?
No.
I mean, the answer is always no.
Do you want a Brett Ratner Lord of the Rings remake series, like trilogy? They're remaking it.
I don't want any remakes.
They say they're remaking this trilogy.
Any remake. I know. I don't know why they're going to do that. It's
money.
Like,
They want money. Brett Ratner?
I mean, there's some stuff that can be, I guess, updated, but it just feels like it's going to be, I'm always going to look to these and it was such a good, like, he nailed it. Just
what about the Russo brothers?
Oh no, it would be so like I've been like trudging my way through that Citadel show just because I've started it. Like it's just horrible. Like talk about not understanding scope and things, and like Peter Jackson was able to do scope of across all these worlds, make it feasible, understandable, and still like we care about these characters. Which I think laid the groundwork for a lot of the fantasy shows that are trying to be like Lord of the Rings, and like and they get lost in their own complicatedness, but or not understanding how to present it to us. Except like I think Game of Thrones did that well in the beginning. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't want a remake.
Even Peter Jackson tried to go back to this.
Yeah, and
it didn't work out.
Yeah, because they didn't know what they were like. It was the magic of like not knowing, like, oh, this actually is going to be like the most amazing thing, and like when you're trying to like do the most amazing thing, that's when it sucks.
Exactly.
What about Lord Miller?
They could do
if it's
Lego
an animated show.
Yeah, Lego Lord of the Rings or something. Yeah,
that would be awesome. I would see that. And I think they themselves would not do it, probably.
Right, probably. They're like, no, Peter Jackson already did that. I don't want to.
What about Darren Aronofsky?
That'd be a lot of contemplation.
What about Yorgos Lanthimos? What about Greta Gerwig?
No.
What about Lars von Trier?
Oh, God.
That'd be a lot of, yeah.
What about Damien Chazelle?
Unless we want a musical.
Yeah, exactly.
What about Terrence Malick? You want his Lord of the Rings?
That'll be like a 6-hour extended edition.
Here's the thing, folks. This is happening. I'm giving you a chance to pick your director. Come on now.
Although it would be cool to see like him do the elves version. Maybe it would be a lot of like seeing like the tree. Like he would do good with the natural
nature stuff. Yeah.
Like the nature stuff. Yeah. I wouldn't mind.
Now let me give you a name.
Okay, I was about to say one. Go ahead.
Bong Joon-ho. He'd make a weird Lord of the Rings, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm still a little annoyed we didn't get our Del Toro, like Hobbit.
Well, that's what I was, okay.
He's a smart.
Is that your name? Is that the name you're dropping?
I think so, because we know he can do fantasy. We know he loves his monsters. We know he'd stick to practical as much as possible, and we know he was involved in the Hobbit films at one point. So he's invested in this world. So yeah, I mean, if you're gonna have to do it, it would be someone like him.
What about Alejandro Inarritu?
No.
I don't know if that's the right pick either.
Martin Scorsese.
I think I would do I think I would do Del Toro or Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah. What about Christopher Nolan?
Yeah, because I think
you want Nolan's Lord of the Rings.
I mean, that could be interesting, but I don't think he does more of the he doesn't do creature stuff. So his is more like the big like the human, I mean, like he did Batman, but that was still like a human person. So
you need someone. The part of the reason that all of these movies work is you need someone like Del Toro, like Jackson, like Raimi, who's like worked in like the dirty, grimy practical effects stuff. I think that's what
we can't have CG.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, they all have the experience with like little effed up horror movies.
Yeah, and I don't know if nowadays, just because like this was cheaper back then, I guess, which is weird, but usually I think nowadays like the details aren't there in movies because they're trying to cut costs.
Yeah.
And I feel like one of the things, like even when I watch this for the 50th time, I find something that I haven't, or I like the details are so there with the Weta Workshop masterful thing that they created, and I just feel like it's gonna feel like the armor's not gonna feel, or like the weapons, like if they don't go with Weta and they skimp on the money and they don't really do the detailed 3-year long doing it all at the same time, it's gonna feel messed up. And so I haven't even finished the prequel of the Lord of the Rings on Amazon because I saw the first thing and it felt like those like it was fine, but it was like big in scope and everything, but it didn't have like the magic and heart of like these movies, because you can't recreate that. And I think if you're forcing it, you can't do it. You can't do that. I think, I don't know. I think it was just something special. So, I mean, if they're going to do it, they're going to do it, but I don't know if I'll enjoy it. And even I'm one of those people, like I'll take as much as, content as I can of like stuff I love, but I think now I'm reaching a limit where I'm like, no, I need the quality.
Yeah.
Careful what you wish for. Yeah.
I'm like, I've changed my mind on that, because when I was younger, I was like, oh, I want to see all the, everything behind the scenes. But that was like watching stuff that was actually, they were putting thought into that I wanted to see. So now I don't know. I don't want it just for the sake of wanting
I've got 4 last names.
Especially like the Harry Potter, the Harry Potter
Oh,
series.
yeah. You excited for that?
No.
I've got 4 final director names. I want your instant reactions to them. Alex Garland.
No, that's
not
too sci-fi.
After Men? No, I don't think so.
Okay. Tim Burton.
No, not in this era.
No, not anymore.
Taika Waititi.
No,
I'm burnt out on him now too.
Yeah, I think it's that he's not substance based anymore.
Rian Johnson.
No, I think it'll be too. It's not the right fit. He's not creature based.
I like The Last Jedi. I know Jason hates it, so
he
deconstructs things.
I want them to hand Aragorn that broken sword. I want him to chuck it over his fucking shoulder and just be a miserable bastard the entire time. It's like, who needs protagonists in films anymore? Who needs it?
Right.
Also, maybe it needs to be
your own protagonist. That's the message.
Yeah, maybe it needs to be somebody not on that list that we don't know of, and it needs to be sort of like someone who can just go balls deep and doesn't have their own filmography, you know, or like maybe they've made like 1 or 2 things that like pre
Josh Trank
thing, unless
Collins Trevorrow.
No, this is no.
JJ
This
Abrams.
is depressing. Let's go back to just talking about Two Towers.
Okay, all right.
And the amazing.
What are your final thoughts on Two Towers, and where do you score it? Because it's obviously our number ones of the week, right, folks?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yes.
So what?
Mine's number 1.
What's your final thoughts, Kat?
9.8.
9.8.
It's one of the weird ones where I can accept the less snazzy parts because I understand why they're there. And then that Battle of Helm's Deep changed my life and the course of what I wanted to do. So I think like just loving that sort of fantastical thing and what film could do. So I think I owe a lot to Two Towers.
I like that you self-edited from boring to not as snazzy.
Yeah. Because it's not boring. It's like what we consider boring, but when you realize a story, like a storyteller needs to have those parts, and it's just, I think it's too like it's not boring is not the correct term for that.
What the score was 9.8? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's near perfect. In my eyes.
Holy mama mia!
Even with those boring parts, which is funny.
Yeah. Holy guacamole! Robert Yaniz Jr., final thoughts of the Two Towers, your score, your rank, and don't be wrong this time with your logic and your reasoning.
So last episode, I did a lot of, last time we talked about this franchise, at least, I did a lot of saying, oh, it's great, but
yeah,
there's no buts. This is where, like, if we put Fellowship in the vault, like, this clearly needs to be in there along with it, in my opinion. And this, of the three, it probably works the best as a standalone experience, weirdly, even though it doesn't have a beginning or an end, because the character journeys are so focused, because Merry and Pippin have an arc, because Gollum even kind of has a bit of an arc where at the end we're just like, oh, I guess he's a villain, and that's where we end up with him. You guys, I think, praised in the first movie the whole, all we have to do is decide what to do with the time that is given to us thing. Yeah. I think the Sam monologue at the end here, where he's talking about, the great stories, and that there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. I think that, and then afterwards, them sort of having that meta commentary on like, oh, what about Sam? I want to hear more about Sam. They think people over all of that. I think trumps that. I love Eowyn in this movie. I think it's nice to have a female character who actually does more than, other than Arwen running away with Frodo from the Nazgul. She's basically just a literal pixie dream girl in this franchise. So it's nice to have a female character that actually picks up a sword and actually gets to kick some asses, particularly in the next movie.
I am no man. Yeah.
Exactly. I love how Howard Shore's score to all three of these is incredible.
Yes.
We already talked about the visuals. Even things like there's enough cool moments, like Legolas sliding down the stairs on that shield, but not like the Hobbit movies where he's jumping on rocks in midair and floating. It's like they toe that balance where it feels grounded enough, even in this fantasy world. And I love Gollum. People can hear on Franchise Detours right now, Jason and I talking about how great Andy Serkis is in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Correct.
And
so good.
That all begins here. Like, this is where he becomes the king of mocap. And those scenes where Gollum and Smeagol are arguing with themselves, I love all that stuff. I think it's a one-man show for those periods. And I think, as Jason and I said on my show, he needs to have an Oscar by now. Yes. Like, it's ridiculous what he's achieved.
He needs an honorary Oscar.
Yeah, exactly. Something. So I'm not I sound stronger and more effusive about this than Kat, but I'm still going 9.5 out of 10. And it's obviously my best of the week.
All right, it's time for a recap. Robert and Kat are in agreement that the worst of the week is Men in Black 2. Robert gave it a 2.5. Kat gave it a 5. I'm closer to Kat, but it's not my number 5. I disagreed vehemently. The worst of the week is Attack of the Clones, so I give a 4 out of 10. My number 4 is Men in Black 2, which I gave a 6.8 out of 10. Their number 4s are Clones. Robert gave it a 6 out of 10, and Kat gave it a 5.2, so higher than me in every conceivable category. We all agree on number 3. Robert gave it a 7.2. It's Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Gave it a 7.2. Kat gave it a 7.5. I gave it a 7.0. So we're all right there. It's mid. There it's not bad, but it's mid, and it's about a 7 to 7.5. I think we could all live with that.
Yeah.
Number 2, we are all in agreement again, which is Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. Robert gave it an 8.2. Kat gave it a 7.8. I am right there with Robert with an 8.2 out of 10. So, and we're pretty close. 7.8, 8.2 is even closer. So we're all in agreement there. And we all agree that number 1 is Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Robert gave it a net 9.5. Kat gave it an almost perfect 9.8. And I only gave it an 8.5. I did not enjoy it this much this time around, but I think that's because of the extended cut. I think I should have watched the theater.
Yeah, I think so.
So,
yeah, I recommend to anybody who hasn't seen any of the Lord of the Rings, watch the theatrical cut first. And if you really love those, then you should watch the extended cuts.
Yeah, I agree.
Because they're theatrical for a reason.
I goofed. I goofed. Okay. I goofed all this episode.
So that's your fault.
Yeah, it's my fault. I goofed. I goofed hard. And Robert tried to dissuade me of my goofery through logic and reason, and Kat through passion. And I would not be dissuaded. They're both wrong. I'm right. Goofery aside. So, it really doesn't matter who I side with because we basically have the same list.
Yeah.
All three of us. So, going on to the guest list is Two Towers. Going on to the short list is Two Towers. All three of us are in agreement. It's Two Towers. I'm going to then make a plea to the audience before we head into Beach Brawl, our very next last movie standing, where the reigning defending champion, the Lady One, will take on a brand new challenger. I don't ever make a plea about the vault directly since I no longer compete in it, but I am going to this time. I think now. I hope you too can join me again when we talk about Return of the King. We can close this out. You're two of my favorite guests in the history of the show. Love you both. Love having you on. Robert, we'll start with you. What do you got going on? What should people tune into here in mid-summer 2023 to late summer 2023?
Absolutely. Well, if you want to hear more of me talking Star Wars, Harry Potter, and Spider-Man, find those episodes on the Close Watch feed, which used to be Crooked Table Podcast. I'm also talking X-Men in that franchise, 10 X-Men movies. Please send your thoughts and prayers to me as I try to make my way through all of that on Franchise Detours. And you can listen to both of those on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, and other podcatchers, as well as crookedtable.com. I'm on Twitter at Crooked Table.
Kat, one of my all-time faves. Where can we find you?
Well, yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Things Cat Loves. I'm doing a more select film stuff, film criticism stuff. So, a little bit scattered, but I've been doing some reviews over at Awards Watch and just doing a variety of stuff everywhere. And a lot of dog photos on my socials if you want that.
Dog photos, a lot of visits to movie sets that you're working on that you can't talk about.
Yes.
Yeah,
I can talk about.
All right.
But when it's out, I'll talk about it.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. I really appreciate both of you. You're two of my favorites, like I said. Please support these two, whatever they do in their endeavors. It would mean a lot to me. You can find us on social media at Binge Movies on Twitter, at Binge Movies on Letterboxd. You can find us on Patreon, patreon.com/binge movies. I've taken on a project so big, it's driving me insane. I'm going through the entire filmography of Albert Pune. If you don't know who that is, go over on Patreon. I'm doing a long series of special features, audio essays that are very strange, but I'm going. I've got other audio essays I've done over there. What's an audio essay? Do you like video essays? It's that, but it doesn't have any video. We've got live watches, live streams of some classic video store era movies. We've got, I'm doing a long form written review series on the video nasties from the UK, as well as horror movies from the horror section. And I'm going to be starting from the action section, where I'm going into all of the great B-movie action films as voted on and selected by our top tier patrons. Over 100 action films, over 100 horror movies. I'm going to be covering them all, and over like 200 video nasties or some shit. 72 that are on the prosecuted list. Going through all of that, plus instant reactions, even more instantaneously with extended cuts. So if you like the instant reactions where I go to the movie theater, I come back, I react to the film, they get even longer versions on Patreon. We've got 4 levels of support. I think it's worth people's time. I hope it is. I hope it's worth their money. So that's where it's at. Thank you so much. I hope this VHS summer is treating you well. I need a fucking vacation. This is Jason from Binge Movies. God bless. And until next time, binge on.